Germany of Iron and Blood. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 276, Defeated. The turret of the tank turned slowly and quickly locked onto the firing Russian machine gun. Boom. Orange flames shone at the muzzle of the tank gun, and a shell hit the heavy machine gun of the Russian army in the blink of an eye. During the violent explosion, the machine gun of the Russian army was directly destroyed. As for the brave Russian soldier, he was also blown to pieces. More and more German tanks broke through the Russian defense line, rushed to their positions, and began to use machine guns and tank guns wantonly to massacre the Russian troops on the position. The entire battle has completely shown a one-sided situation. Facing the German tank troops, the Russian army had no counter-attack power at all. Although, most of the Russian soldiers were frightened at this time, and they began to flee in all directions. But I have to deny that there are still many brave people in the Russian army who are not afraid of death. They held cluster grenades and wanted to blow up German tanks. It's just that these brave Russian soldiers couldn't succeed at all. What greeted them was the intensive machine gun fire of German tanks. Many Russian soldiers, holding cluster grenades, were beaten into sieves before they rushed to the German tanks. Especially after the infantry who fought with the tanks also broke into the Russian positions. Those Russian troops had no chance to pose a threat to the German tanks. Although, the German army's infantry and tank coordination is only just beginning. But some avenues have been figured out. When the tank is attacking, it provides protection for the infantry behind. At the same time, the infantry is also providing protection for the tanks, preventing Russian soldiers from destroying their tanks in a suicidal way. This complementary attack method enabled the German army to easily defeat the Russian army with a small number of troops. General, the 8th Armored Division has successfully broken through the Russian defense line and is currently expanding its results. A staff officer reported to Lieutenant General Francois, "Invest 2 more infantry divisions and let the 8th Armored Division continue to serve as the vanguard to attack the Russian army. Try to defeat the Russian army at one time so that they can no longer organize a strong defense." Lieutenant General Francois ordered. If this battle can completely defeat the 2nd Russian Guards Army, then the German army will be sure to win this battle. The next step is to consider how to achieve the greatest results. "Yes, General." The staff officer immediately went to give the order. The 2 infantry divisions, which had already been ready for battle, immediately entered the position, making it impossible for the Russian army to reorganize the position that had already been broken through. After the attack by the German 8th Armored Division, the forward position of the Russian army fell in less than an hour. On the battlefield, the corpses of Russian soldiers were everywhere. Many of them are even incomplete. Either it was shredded by German artillery fire, or it was shredded by German tanks. German tanks ran directly over the corpses of these Russian troops. After the heavy tank passed by, the tracks had already crushed the Russian soldiers to the point of being inhuman. Blood flowed everywhere, even making the mud muddy. After the German army broke through the forward position of the Russian army, it did not stay. The 8th Armored Division continued to attack the deep positions of the Russian army. Although, some tanks had mechanical failures during the battle and had to stop advancing. However, most of the tanks can continue to drive, and the combat effectiveness of the 8th Armored Division has not been weakened much by this. In order to improve the reliability of the tank, Qin Tian asked the German Arms Company to continuously improve the existing tanks, simplify the parts, and make the structure of the tank more simple and reliable. Qin Tian did not hope that the tanks they would equip in the future would become weapons similar to precision instruments. In another time and space, the performance of German tanks in World War II can be said to be the best in the world. But the biggest problem is undoubtedly that the German tanks are so sophisticated that maintenance is simply a nightmare. In addition, the construction of sophisticated tanks requires more man-hours. For the man-hours it takes Germany to manufacture a tank, Soviet Russia has already built several T-34s. This makes the performance of the German Tiger and Leopard tanks able to crush the Soviet Russian T-34. However, in the end, it was still overwhelmed by the sea of tanks composed of T-34s used by Soviet Russia. Qin Tian hopes that in this time and space, the German army can get rid of this fate. Therefore, from the very beginning, he made a request to the munitions company that after the tank was developed, subsequent improvements must find ways to simplify the result of the tank as much as possible, shorten the manufacturing time, and improve reliability. At Qin Tian's request, Duchamps had no choice but to carry out research in this area. From the current point of view, the effect seems to be pretty good. Qin Tian also believed that with the scientific and technological strength of the German Empire, if he didn't make devices, he would definitely be able to be far ahead of other countries in terms of weapons and equipment. After all, with his existence similar to cheating, if Germany can't do this, it would be too bad. The continued German offensive is not a good thing for the Russian Second Guards Army. They had no way to resist the German attack at all, and could only let the German army easily break through their defense lines one after another. Russian Guards Second Army Headquarters. This place is already in chaos. Bad news came one after another from the front line, making the generals of the Russian army terrified. General, the German army has already broken through our front line positions. Their tank troops are too powerful. We have no way to stop their attack. The frontline troops have lost a lot. Now, the Germans are attacking our second line positions. Launch an offensive. However, judging from the attack power of the Germans, it is only a matter of time before the second line positions are broken by the Germans. A Russian general reported, "Arsehole, we are the most powerful army in the Russian Empire, but can't we even resist the German attack a little bit?" Admiral Krapovich was very angry. "General, there is no way. We have no way to stop the German tanks, and we have no weapons to deal with their tanks. This makes our defense line in front of their tanks like paper. The same. It was easily broken through," a general said with a mournful face. Admiral Krapovich sighed. Now he has realized what it means to be defeated like a mountain. The Second Russian Guards Army is now facing such a situation. Chapter 277. Blocking. The German army broke through several lines of defense of the Russian Second Guards Army in one day and severely damaged it. At the same time, the 17th Army of the 8th Army of the German Army also compressed the living space of the Russian army from the east, making the situation of the Second Guards Army of the Russian army even more difficult. Although the Second Russian Guards Army is still fighting, its losses are getting bigger and bigger. At the same time, their courage and confidence seem to be crushed under the crush of the German tank tracks. It can be foreseen that it is only a matter of time before the Second Russian Guards Army is completely defeated or even eliminated. This also made General Krapovich, the commander of the Second Guards Army of the Russian Army, continue to send telegrams to General Letsky, the commander of the 9th Army of the Russian Army, requesting reinforcement. "General, this is the third time that General Krapovich has sent us a telegram for help. It can be seen that the German offensive is very fierce, and the Second Guards Army is almost unable to hold on. You know, the Second Guards, the combat power of the group army is superior to ours. Even if they are beaten by the Germans, they are unable to parry. Even if we join in, I'm afraid that we will not be able to reverse the situation. If it is not good, we will also set us up going," a general suggested. "Yes, General. How about we retreat now?" The generals of the 9th Army of the Russian army were all frightened by the powerful offensive of the German army. They were afraid that, if they went to rescue the Second Guards Army, they would take themselves into it. The Germans' offensive is indeed very strong. Otherwise the Second Guards Army would not have been pushed into such a situation. But if we don't rescue them, the Second Guards Army will die. At that time, His Majesty the Tsar will also, they will not let us go. What's more, we may not have a chance. The Germans must have used the main force to attack the Second Guards Army. Then, they will definitely not use too many troops to stop us. If we can severely damage this part of the German army, and then rush to Rostrow and cooperate with the Second Guards Army, we may not be able to defeat the Germans. No matter how bad it is, we can also rescue the main force of the Second Guards Army. But it is a great achievement. Everyone should consider this point. If everyone is unwilling to take this credit, then I will not force it. However, everyone must not forget that, if the Second Guards Army is eaten by the Germans, we will definitely be eaten by the Germans soon. Admiral Letsky reminded. General, we will do what you say, everyone listens to you. The other generals also expressed their willingness to obey Admiral Letsky's orders one after another. Admiral Letsky nodded with satisfaction. In this case, then speed up and continue northward. Be sure to arrive at Rust Row before sunset tomorrow. Yes, General. All the generals answered loudly. Next, the 9th Army of the Russian Army accelerated its march again. This is almost at their limit marching speed. In the evening of that day, the Russian army arrived at Seedlitz. However, they discovered that the city was already under the control of the German army. The German army built a defensive position on the outskirts of the city, and Seedlitz is the only place where the Russian 9th Army must go north to Rust Row. Therefore, if they want to continue going north, they have only one choice, and that is to defeat the German army occupying here and seize Seedlitz. Other than that, there is no other way. Admiral Letsky did not immediately order the troops to launch an offensive. After a day of driving, the Russian army was already very tired. If you launch an attack now, it is no different from courting death. It is completely to deliver food to the German army. Admiral Letsky ordered the troops to do a good job of defense, take a good night's rest, and launch an attack tomorrow morning. It is the 20th Army under the German 8th Army that is stationed at Seedlitz. There are 3 infantry divisions in the whole army, with a total of more than 50,000 people. Although, the force is only a quarter of the Russian 9th Army. However, if you stick to the line of defense, there is still no problem at all. You must know that the German 8th Army is equipped with a large number of automatic weapons, and its firepower is far different from that of the Russian army. If the Russian army launches an offensive rashly, there will only be one result in the end, and that is that the corpses of Russian soldiers will cover the entire German defense line. General, our reconnaissance unit has discovered the Russians. They stopped advancing in a small town 10 kilometers away from us and are resting. A major general and division commander reported to Lieutenant General Mackinson. Well, what a great opportunity. It was wasted like this. Lieutenant General Mackinson couldn't help but sighed. If the 8th Armored Division is here, we only need to cooperate with them and launch a surprise attack, which is enough to defeat the Russian 9th Army. It is not impossible to wipe out most of the enemy's army. After this battle is over, I must ask His Royal Highness the Crown Prince to equip each army with armored units. Lieutenant General Mackinson said. General, it's best for each infantry division to be equipped with an armored unit. In that case, our attack power will be stronger. The Major General said quickly. Yes, it is best for each division to be equipped with a certain amount of tanks. In this way, our attack power can be further improved. Lieutenant General Mackinson nodded. In the early morning of September 12th, the Russian 9th Army began to attack Seedlitz, where the German 20th Army was stationed. In order to be able to take Seedlitz in one fell swoop in the shortest time, the Russian 9th Army directly invested the main force in the attack. The 9th Army of the Russian Army, like the 2nd Guards Army, has 10 infantry divisions and 2 cavalry divisions under its jurisdiction, with a total strength of about 200,000 troops. In order to ensure the success of the attack, Letsky even mobilized the artillery of the entire group army, more than 476.2mm field guns, to open fire on the positions of the German 20th Army. Fire! Kill those Germans! The artillery commander of the Russian army gave an order. Boom! 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 Hundreds of 76.2mm field guns began to roar and slammed shells one by one into the German positions. However, within 5 minutes after the Russian army fired the artillery, the German artillery began to suppress the Russian artillery positions. 54 150mm heavy howitzers and 108 105mm light howitzers participated in the suppression of the Russian artillery positions. But the Russian army had too many artillery pieces, so a lot of shells still fell on the German positions. Fortunately, the German army's position is relatively strong, and the Russian army's 76.2mm field gun is too powerful, so it did not cause much damage to the German army. Chapter 278, Hit the Wall. Boom. 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 The artillerymen on both sides are doing their best to fire the shells. The Russian army wanted to use artillery shells to destroy the German defense line and clear the way for the infantry to attack. The German army wanted to rely on heavy artillery to suppress the Russian artillery positions and prevent the Russian artillery from causing too much damage to its own defense line. In the artillery battle, although the artillerymen of both sides could not see each other, however, this does not mean that the artillery battle was not tragic. In fact, the artillery battle was also very tragic. Once hit by enemy shells, it will often be smashed to pieces. Boom. A 150mm artillery shell hit an artillery position of the Russian army. After the shell exploded, a crater appeared in the center of the position, and several surrounding 76.2mm field guns were blown away. Those artillerymen were torn to pieces. The shelling of the German army was very accurate. Under the guidance of the artillery observation balloon, it can accurately hit the artillery positions of the Russian army. This caused the artillery losses of the Russian army to rise in a straight line. Within half an hour of the battle, the Russian artillery had to stop. Otherwise, their artillery would probably be lost. Order the infantry to launch an attack. Admiral Letsky had no choice but to order the infantry to launch an attack in advance. Originally, he wanted to carry out long-term firepower preparations, but in that case, their artillery would probably be lost. This is very unfavorable for subsequent operations. Yes, General. A lieutenant general nodded. A few minutes later, more than 30,000 Russian soldiers launched an attack on the German positions. Those yellow and emaciated Russian soldiers, holding bayonet-mounted rifles, rushed towards the German position quickly. They were in a mess, and there was no formation at all. He yelled the slogan "Ula" loudly in his mouth, looking full of momentum. But in fact, it is conceivable how effective it is. The commander of the 20th Army of the German Army used a telescope to observe the situation on the front line. After seeing the Russian army launching an attack, he couldn't help laughing. To be honest, I envy the Russians. Lieutenant General Mackensen said. General, why? The generals under him were a little puzzled. Russia's population is too large, so they don't care about the lives of ordinary soldiers at all, and they can let them die at will. However, the German Empire can't do it. For us, the life of every soldier is important, precious. Therefore, we have to train them with great care and arm them with the best weapons, so that they can save their lives in battle. In this case, it is really too troublesome. It is the Russians who are the most trouble-free. Lieutenant General Mackensen exclaimed. The other German generals couldn't help laughing. Indeed, Russia has a large population, which makes their soldiers sufficient. When fighting, they don't care about the lives of ordinary soldiers at all. However, Germany is different. Germany has a small population, so it cares about the life of every soldier. This makes them have to train every soldier into an elite and equip the troops with the best weapons. Of course, everyone can hear that Lieutenant General Mackensen is mocking the Russians. If Russia didn't have such a large population and so many troops, they would have been defeated by other countries long ago. It is impossible for Russia to rank among the world powers at all. Order the front line and prepare for battle. The Russians have a lot of troops, so don't hold back and kill them all. Lieutenant General Mackensen ordered. The expression on his face was very cold, as if he didn't care about the lives of those Russian soldiers at all. Yes, General. Boom. 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 Russian army's offensive had just begun when it was heavily shelled by the German army. The artillery battalions of the previous infantry regiments did not fire. They saved all the shells to deal with the Russian infantry. The German 75mm field gun, the imitation of the French Mis-75, has been improved. The most important thing is to reduce the weight and improve the reliability. But the maximum rate of fire can still reach 15 rounds per minute. More than 175mm field guns frantically poured shells at the Russian offensive troops. If the dense shells fell like raindrops, they exploded in the Russian army queue, tearing those Russian soldiers to pieces. Almost every explosion of a shell can set off a **** storm in the Russian army's queue and take away countless lives. However, the Russian army has too many troops and has not been affected by it. Those Russian soldiers, as if they were not afraid of death, charged forward with their heads down until they themselves were killed by shells. Damn the Germans, they have prepared so many cannons, it's really abominable. Admiral Letsky, watching his soldiers suffer heavy casualties under the heavy German artillery fire, couldn't help but feel greatly scolded. "General, there is no way around it. The Germans' artillery was already much stronger than ours. Now, they are equipped with heavy artillery such as 150mm among their infantry, and we are even further behind by them. It's gone," the Russian artillery commander said with a bitter face. Admiral Letsky nodded, feeling helpless in his heart. This is caused by the gap in national strength between the two sides, and these soldiers have nothing to do about it. Fire. Soon, the mortars on the German positions also started shelling. One after another shells fell into the Russian army's queue, once again reaping the lives of the Russian army. Although the power of the mortar is not great, the German army is equipped with a large number of such artillery with a fast rate of fire and capable of curt fire. Now, the mortar has almost become the best infantry support firepower equipped by the German army. When the Russian army paid a heavy price, it rushed to a place about 200 or 300 meters away from the German defense line. But a large number of general-purpose machine guns and squad machine guns of the German army started shooting again. The dense machine gun bullets almost formed an airtight barrage, and the Russian army slammed into this barrage. But how can a fragile human body fight against steel? The consequence of this is that the attacking Russian soldiers, like cutting wheat, fell to the ground row by row, and were all shot and killed by the German army with intensive machine gun fire. The massacre has begun. It's really spectacular to watch these Russians die one after another. Lieutenant General Mackensen sighed. "General, as you said, the Russian population is too large. If we don't kill them like this, how can we win?" A major general said. "Haha, yes. Let the Russians stand on our defense line and smash their heads." Lieutenant General Mackensen laughed. Chapter 279. This is massacre. On the German position, a squad machine gun was firing crazily, and the magazine of 30 bullets was quickly emptied. The machine gunner skillfully changed the magazine and continued to fire. In front of their position, the corpses of many Russian soldiers have been piled up. The position defended by this infantry squad is more than 10 meters long, and this squad machine gun is their most powerful defensive weapon. Prepare the grenadier. At 2 o'clock, a heavy machine gun from the Russian army is moving up. Let's get rid of it, the squad leader ordered. The grenadier immediately adjusted the shooting angle and then started shooting. Boom. Boom. 2 consecutive grenades were fired in a very short time. The heavy machine gun that was launched by the Russian army was blown up on the spot, and the heavy machine gunner was also killed. Bang! A clear gunshot sounded, and a low-ranking officer of the Russian army had already screamed and fell to the ground. This was done by German snipers. They specialize in fighting against valuable targets. The low-level officers of the Russian army, as well as machine gunners, are their key targets. Bang! Bang, bang. The semi-automatic rifles also kept firing, killing the living targets of the Russian army. The various weapons of an infantry squad cooperate with each other, making the small line of defense they garrisoned impregnable. The Russian army can't even rush into the range of 50 meters in front of their line of defense, let alone break through the German line of defense. After the restructuring and large-scale refitting, the combat effectiveness of the German army has been significantly improved. With the combat effectiveness of the Russian army, wanting to confront the German army is a dream. Not to mention that the Russian army is now attacking, and the German army is defending, which allows the German army to better use their firepower advantage. The German defense line can be described as impenetrable. It is almost impossible for the Russian army to break through the German defense line. Unless the Russian army can bombard the German defense line with heavy artillery, it will directly use violent shelling to destroy the German defense line. In this way, they will be able to deal with the powerful firepower of the German army. Otherwise, they will have to fill it with their lives. Of course, using human lives to fill it is originally a tactic used by the Russian army. In the previous battles, they were often invincible. However, when the Russian army faced the German army that had been armed to the teeth, such tactics were somewhat useless. The lives of their soldiers are at most consuming some German ammunition. No matter how you look at it, human life is far more valuable than ammunition. Damn it, aren't these Russians afraid of death? We have killed so many, and they are still attacking. A young German soldier's hand was numb from the rifle. The lives of the Russians are worthless at all. Their commanders didn't take them seriously at all. The squad leader explained casually. Under the onslaught of the Russian army, the German army had to give full play to its own firepower, which made the German soldiers from the initial shock to complete numbness. Facing the dense formation of the Russian army, they only need to numbly pull the trigger. The bullets fired can always kill these Russians. In the case of heavy losses, the Russian army's offensive had to be temporarily stopped. Most of the Russian troops participating in the attack were slaughtered within half an hour. The remaining troops were also frightened and had to retreat. Although these Russian soldiers are very brave. However, watching the comrades around him fall down one by one, their deaths were miserable. Anyone in such an environment will also be afraid. Under such circumstances, they can only escape. Bastard. This is not a war at all, but a massacre. The Germans are using their powerful weapons to massacre our brave soldiers. General Letsky, commander of the Russian 9th Army, saw this scene. After that, he cursed helplessly. The other Russian generals also remained silent. Indeed, in terms of firepower, there is a huge gap between the Russian army and the German army. So much so that on the battlefield, their troops were completely suppressed. The attacking troops were massacred by the superior firepower of the German army. Is there anything you can do? Admiral Risky asked. General, unless our artillery can beat the Germans, then use heavy artillery to bombard the German defense line. In this case, it may be successful. A general suggested. Impossible. The artillery strength of the Germans is far stronger than ours. They are even equipped with heavy artillery. But we are basically only equipped with field artillery. The artillery commander shook his head. If we have German tanks, we can also break through the German defense line. A general underestimated in a low voice. The 2nd Guards Army was defeated by the Germans, and it is said that it was mainly due to the tanks. Those invulnerable iron bumps easily broke through the Russian army's defense line. If the Russian 9th Army also had tanks, wouldn't it be a piece of cake to break through the German defense line in front of us? Don't say these are useless. Let's not say that we don't have tanks. Even if we really have tanks, who knows if the Germans have weapons against tanks? Don't forget, the Germans are ahead in the development of weapons and equipment. We have a lot, Admiral Letsky said. Suddenly, the Russian generals fell silent. Indeed, the Russians were helpless against the German tanks. However, it does not mean that the Germans have no choice. General, it seems that we have only two choices. Either continue to attack and launch an attack regardless of the cost of casualties to break through the German defense line. Otherwise, we have no choice but to retreat. Retreat? Admiral Risky frowned. For him, this option is the last option. He would never make this choice unless it was absolutely necessary. Order the troops to continue the offensive. Regardless of the cost, we must break through the German defense line. Admiral Letsky ordered. Yes, General. All the Russian generals replied. An hour later, the Russian army launched an offensive again. Countless Russian soldiers were driven by Russian officers like livestock to attack the German defense line. In order to break through the German defense line, the Russian army stormed again and again. Countless Russian soldiers rushed towards the German defense line like a great tide. However, the German defense line was like a reef standing on the seashore, and it still stood tall despite the Russian attack. The offensive of the Russian army did not come to an end until the sun went down. However, apart from consuming a large amount of ammunition by the German army, they had no effect anymore. The corpses of the Russian army have already covered the entire battlefield. Chapter 280, Desperate Situation. When the 9th Army of the Russian Army was blocked by the 20th Army of the German Army in Seedles, the life of the 2nd Army of the Russian Guards was even more difficult. The main force of the German 8th Army, the 11th Corps, 17th Corps and 8th Panzer Division, launched an even more violent attack on them. Relying on the powerful assault force of the 8th Armored Division, the Russian 2nd Guards Army could not organize a strong defense at all. They would often be torn apart by the 8th Armored Division as soon as they deployed a line of defense. The entire 2nd Guards Army was completely in chaos. The formation of various troops has also been disrupted. Colonel Guderian, His Majesty the Crown Prince asked the 8th Armored Division to continue to attack and divide the Russian army. The infantry will follow behind, and the Russian army will continue to divide and encircle and annihilate them. Lieutenant General Francois said. Yes, General. However, our tanks are losing very quickly. If we maintain the current assault speed, there will be no tanks that can be activated in at most 3 days, Colonel Guderian said with a bitter face. Although, the reliability of the tanks they have installed now has been greatly improved compared to the original batch. However, in frequent battles, it is often damaged due to mechanical failure. His Royal Highness means that as long as there is still one tank that can be activated, the attack cannot be stopped. The tanks that will be replenished for you have already arrived at the border. If you lose a regiment, you can immediately receive another regiment, Francois said the Lieutenant General. Yes, General. Guderian nodded. In this case, he will have no worries. The 8th Armored Division of the German Army completely carried out Qin Tian's order. Their continuous assaults on the Russian army kept the 2nd Russian Guards Army under suppression, and their losses continue to rise. More than a dozen tanks covered an infantry battalion and attacked the position of an infantry division of the Russian army. This is not a full infantry division, but an infantry division that has been hit hard, although their strength is still several times that of the attacking German army. However, facing the German tanks, they still couldn't resist. The German tanks are coming, run away, a Russian soldier shouted loudly, trying to turn around and flee. However, the bullet fired from the German tank hit his back and pierced his body. The tracks of the tank pressed against the Russian army's position invisible, and the Russian soldiers scattered and fled amidst the screams. The German tanks followed behind them and fired with machine guns, and the Russian soldiers fell in pieces. The tracks of the tank ran over the corpses, grinding them to a pulp. The German infantry followed the tank, protecting the rear of the tank, and at the same time, wiped out the remnants of the enemy on the position. In less than half an hour, the battle was over. This position was captured by the German army, and the Russian army stationed here was defeated again, and suffered heavy losses. The Russian army captured by the German army alone exceeded 2,000 people, and at least thousands of people were killed. This battle is really too simple. We just need to follow the tanks and attack continuously. After breaking through the Russian positions, we are waiting to capture prisoners. A German captain said, smoke, a face of comfort. Yes. Under the wise leadership of His Royal Highness the Crown Prince, our 8th Army has become the most powerful army in the Imperial Army. The Russians dare to attack us. They are looking for death. The face of a German soldier was full of the worship of Qin Tian. Indeed, as the German army won one victory after another, Qin Tian's influence in the army was constantly increasing. Personality cults are often gradually formed in this way. Everyone, hurry up and take a rest. After half an hour, continue to attack. A major battalion commander came over and said to them, yes, sir. The two answered quickly, I really envy those who drive tanks. They only need to drive tanks to rampage, but we have to run behind them. At that time, instead of being beaten to death by the Russians, we will be exhausted. The captain officers said, yes, those guys, hiding in the tank, don't have to worry about Russian bullets. The lieutenant officer also looked envious. Indeed, armored soldiers have become the envy of all branches of the army. Not only because tanks are very powerful when attacking, but also because tank soldiers are safer than infantry. The 8th Armored Division of the German Army has been dispersed into battalions and companies, assisting the infantry to launch attacks. With their support, the German army was able to attack the strong Russian army with fewer troops, and achieved one victory after another. The 2nd Russian Guards Army was constantly weakened under the attack of this German tactic. Of course, for the German army, this is a process that is about to win. However, for the Russian 2nd Guards Army, it was a very painful process. The feeling of watching one's troops being weakened little by little and dying little by little is indeed very uncomfortable. Bastards. Damn the Germans. The whole battlefield has become a mess. How are they going to fight? Admiral Krapovich now felt a deep sense of powerlessness. The Russian army lacked radio communication equipment, and when the entire battlefield became chaotic, the command became even more chaotic. General Krapovich's orders can only be issued to troops at the division level. As for the lower level troops, they are completely out of command. Such a situation is definitely very unfavorable to the command of the troops. However, Admiral Krapovich has no other way. The entire 2nd Guards Army, under the impact of the German 8th Armored Division, has been completely confused. There are situations where generals can't find soldiers and soldiers can't find their superiors. General, the 18th Infantry Division of the Guards reported that, except for the division headquarters, all subordinate our troops have been eaten by the Germans. A staff officer reported, "Damn. Send a telegram to the subordinate infantry corps, asking them to gather their troops immediately, and the Germans cannot go on like this." Admiral Krapovich ordered, "Yes, General. But, it's easier said than done. In this extremely chaotic battlefield, it is almost impossible to gather troops. There are German tanks rampaging everywhere. It was under such circumstances that many Russian troops had to surrender to the Germans. The Russian Guards' Second Army has long been in a desperate situation." Chapter 281, Prevention of Escape. Surrender. Hand in your guns and don't kill. A battalion of the Russian army was surrounded by a company of the German army under a small hillside. Although the German army is much smaller than the Russian army, it is undoubtedly the tanks that followed the German infantry company that really made the Russian army on the hillside throw a mouse. During the panicked retreat, the infantry battalion of the Russian army had lost almost all of its heavy equipment, and only 2 heavy machine guns were left in the whole battalion. With 2 heavy machine guns, it is obviously impossible to withstand the attack of German tanks. After receiving a promise from the German army to guarantee their safety, the infantry battalion of the Russian army, under the leadership of their commander, surrendered to the German army. Early before the war started, Qin Tian specially asked the soldiers of the German 8th Army to teach some simple Russian. In particular, the words surrender and hand in your gun, but not kill require every German soldier to be able to master them. Right now, right in the middle of a fight, it's put to good use. Under the call of this slogan, countless Russian soldiers handed over their weapons to the German army and obediently walked into the prisoner of war camp. Throughout the battle on September 12th, the 2nd Russian Guards Army once again suffered heavy losses. After 2 days in a row, they had already lost half of their troops. This made them lose their strength advantage when facing the main force of the German 8th Army. In addition, the Russian army was in chaos, divided and surrounded by the German army into pieces, waiting for the German army to eat them piece by piece. It can be said that the destruction of the Russian 2nd Guards Front Army is already a matter of time. Your Highness, the current situation on the front line is very good. The 2nd Guards Army of the Russian army has been completely defeated by us. It is only a matter of time before we can completely solve it. Admiral Hindenburg said, very happy. If the 2nd Russian Guards Army could be eaten in one bite, then there would already be 3 Russian army groups that were eliminated by the German 8th Army. With the addition of the Russian 9th Army, which is already on the chopping board, this means that the 8th Army has eliminated the Russian army 5 times its own size, and ensured the safety of the eastern front of the German Empire on its own. This is undoubtedly a great contribution to the German Empire. Originally, Admiral Hindenburg thought that he would never have the chance to be promoted to Marshal in his life. But now it seems that after the battle on the Eastern Front, with his military merits, he will definitely be promoted to Marshal of the Empire. This made Marshal Hindenburg more active in fighting. He can't wait to win the final victory. Well, after eating the 8th Army of the Russian Guards, it's time for the 9th Army of the Russian Army. How is the situation of the 20th Army? Are they under a lot of pressure? Qin Tian asked. Your Highness, although the Russian 9th Army launched a fierce attack on the 20th Army's defense line, but overall, it did not pose too much threat to us. General Mackensen reported that the 20th Army, in addition to the greater logistical pressure, there is almost no other pressure. Major General Ludendorff also had a smile on his face. For soldiers, victory always makes them very happy. That's good. However, we must prevent the Russian 9th Army from fleeing immediately after the 2nd Russian Guards Army is eaten by us. In order to achieve complete victory on the Eastern Front, we must wipe out as many Russian troops as possible. 9th Army Group. Qin Tian said, Your Highness, we will do our best. However, the escape of the Russian 9th Army is almost certain. But the railways in Poland are no better than in East Prussia. The speed of our mobilization of troops is definitely not the same as in East Prussia. Compared. Major General Ludendorff said. Qin Tian nodded. He was also aware of this problem. Gather our trucks and load the troops. I don't believe that the two legs of the Russians can outrun the four wheels of our trucks. Qin Tian said. Yes, Your Highness. Ludendorff nodded. This is a solution. But it is undoubtedly difficult to be foolproof. Your Highness, I'm afraid we have to use other methods to prevent the Russian army from escaping. Admiral Hindenburg said. Qin Tian thought for a while, and then said, send a telegram to the 8th Air Force, and ask them to prepare. If the 9th Russian army escapes, they will attack the Russian army, and try to slow down the marching speed of the Russian army. Our main forces catch up with the 9th group of the Russian army, annihilate them, and create opportunities. Yes, Your Highness. Admiral Hindenburg and Major General Ludendorff both nodded. Although he wasn't sure if dispatching the Air Force could hold back the Russian 9th Army, since Qin Tian was so confident, it might really be effective. Even if it doesn't have much effect, the use of the Air Force will inevitably cause greater losses to the Russian 9th Army. The 8th Air Force has been established for a long time. However, after the outbreak of the war, apart from providing reconnaissance support to the 8th Army, it did not play much role. Because the air power of the Russian army is very weak, the 8th Air Force has little use on the Eastern Front. Unlike the Western Front, the Germans and the British and French allied forces were already fighting and used aircraft extensively. Of course, because the German army was more fully prepared after being equipped with the new fighter jets developed by the German Aircraft Manufacturing Company, the air forces of Britain and France were almost defeated. However, due to improper use, although the German Air Force has achieved considerable results, it has never been able to reverse the situation on the Western Front. On the Western Front, although the German army still has an advantage, this advantage is constantly weakening with the passage of time. As long as the German army cannot defeat France in a short time on the Western Front, then, this war will inevitably fall into a protracted war. Even the Battle of the Marne just launched by Little Moltke, although in the early days, the German offensive was fierce. But now it seems that there is still a feeling of anticlimax. If the German army wants to take Paris, I'm afraid it will still be very difficult. Of course, for Qin Tian, this doesn't seem to be his business. From the current point of view, it is enough for him to command the 8th Army to win on the Eastern Front. As long as Little Moltke is still the chief of staff of the German army, he will not be able to intervene in the Western Front. Of course, if the Battle of the Marne fails to achieve the result that William II wanted, it is estimated that the chief of staff, Little Moltke, will come to an end. No matter how good his personal relationship with William II was, William II would not tolerate him anymore. Chapter 282, Annihilation. On the night of September 12th, the headquarters of the Russian Guard's Second Army, after the sun went down, the German attack stopped. This allowed the Second Guards Army to finally gain some respite. General, the current situation is becoming more and more unfavorable to us. I'm afraid we have to make plans. A lieutenant general suggested. I know. It's unimaginable that the Germans' attack power is so powerful. Perhaps it was a mistake to join the Allied powers to fight against Germany this time. Admiral Krapovich sighed. It's just that he can't decide which side Russia joins in the war. Even if he is a general of the Russian army, he can be regarded as a high position. But in the face of such national affairs, there is still no right to decide, not even the right to make suggestions. Tsar Nicholas II was also not a person who could listen to opinions. The current situation of the Second Russian Guards Army is indeed very bad. Not only did they lose nearly half of their troops, but at the same time, their living space became smaller and smaller under the continuous compression of the German army. Most of the troops that are still fighting are still surrounded by the German army. Once the German army gradually eats up their vital forces, the Second Guards Army will die. Originally, Admiral Krapovich pinned his hopes on the Russian 9th Army, hoping that the 9th Army could break through the blocking of the German army in time and come to rescue them. However, now the Russian 9th Army is firmly blocked by the German army in Seedles, unable to move northward. This undoubtedly made the hopes of Admiral Krapovich come to nothing. At the same time, General Krapovich also deeply realized how powerful the German army is. Even if they are fighting an enemy twice as large as themselves at the same time, they can still firmly grasp the advantage. Victory may even come soon. Under such circumstances, how could they possibly defeat the Russians? Damn. Ivan Zelensky, it's that guy. If he hadn't threatened us to go to Warsaw, we wouldn't have fallen into the trap of the Germans. None of this would have happened. Admiral Krapovich gritted his teeth with hatred for Admiral Ivan Zelensky. If Admiral Ivan Zelensky dared to appear in front of him, he would definitely draw his gun and shoot him without hesitation. As for Admiral Ivan Zelensky, he seemed to know that he had caused trouble again, so he stayed in Warsaw as a coward and dared not send another telegram. But because of him, the Russian Guard's 2nd Army and 9th Army were in crisis, but it couldn't be changed. General, why don't we break through? A general suggested. Break out. How do you break out? How many troops do you have in your 6th Guards Army? Another general sneered. Immediately, the general fell silent. Indeed, although the 2nd Russian Guards Army, half of the remaining troops continue to fight. But the problem is that these troops are almost surrounded by the German army. In the case of chaotic command, it is simply impossible to issue orders to them in time. It is impossible to gather these troops, let alone command them to break through. Then what should we do? Should we just wait to die like this? No one wants to wait for death, but the problem is that there is no other way. They couldn't even break through the siege, and there was no other way but to stick to their positions and wait for the Germans to attack. General, a telegram from General Letsky. The adjutant came over and handed a telegram to General Krapovich. After Admiral Krapovich finished reading the telegram, a wry smile appeared on his face. General, what did General Letsky say? All the generals asked. General Letsky said that the 9th Army has done its best. However, the German defense line is very strong. They have already suffered heavy losses under the German defense line. Now, their losses have exceeded 50,000 people, said Admiral Krapovich. General, is the 9th Army planning to retreat? A general asked. Although, even if the 9th Army retreats, it is understandable. However, they were somewhat unacceptable in their hearts. General, what should we do now? Even the 9th Army of the Russian army is about to give up. For them, they have undoubtedly lost their last chance. Send a telegram to all the troops we can contact and break out to the east early tomorrow morning. As for whether we can successfully break through, it depends on God's will. May God bless us, Admiral Krapovich said. May God bless us. Other Russian generals also said one after another. Indeed, the only thing they can do now is to pray to God. On September 13th, the surrounded troops of the Russian 2nd Guards Army began a large-scale breakout. These Russian soldiers, with empty eyes and numb expressions on their faces, held their rifles and staggered on their feet. Under the urging of the officers, they attacked the German defense line. Of course, what greeted them was the rain of bullets from the German army. Da-da-da. The German machine guns fired wildly, knocking the attacking Russian army to the ground. Boom. Boom. Cannons of various calibers, mortars, and grenades were also firing continuously, smashing the shells at the Russian army, taking away the fresh lives of the Russian army. This is the last struggle of the Russians, and the pressure on the 17th Army is very high. Major General Ludendorff reported to Qin Tian. Ask General Zekert, his 17th Army, whether it can withstand the Russian attack. Qin Tian said, yes, General. Major General Ludendorff nodded. They all know that whether the 17th Army can resist the Russian army will be related to whether they can eat all the Russian Guards' 2nd Army in this battle. Fortunately, although the 17th Army has been under a lot of pressure, it is not impossible to hold on. Although the Russian army's offensive was fierce, there was no unified command at all, just like a mob. Under such circumstances, it can only cause a little trouble to the German army. The large-scale counterattack of the Russian army lasted for more than half a day before it ended. The huge loss made it impossible for the Russian army to continue to attack. When the Russian army's breakout operation had to stop, it meant that their breakout had failed. Next, they had nothing to do but wait for death. On September 14th, the battle came to an end. In the 2nd Russian Guards Army, except for a very small number of people who escaped the encirclement due to the chaos, the rest were all annihilated or entered the German prisoner of war camp, including Admiral Krapovich. Chapter 283, Escape. The destruction of the 2nd Russian Guards Army was undoubtedly a devastating blow to the 9th Russian Army. Although Admiral Letsky already knew that he could not rescue the 2nd Guards Army, However, he has not yet made up his mind when to retreat. The German troops stationed in Seedles, like an iron wall, blocked the northward path of the Russian Ninth Army, and blocked it tightly. The powerful firepower made the Russian army helpless, and after attacking rashly, they paid heavy losses. This made Admiral Letsky no longer dare to attack at will. On the morning of September 14th, Admiral Letsky received news of the destruction of the Russian Second Guards Army. General, the Second Guards Army has been annihilated by the Germans, and the entire army has been almost wiped out. Admiral Krapovich was also captured by the Germans. A general reported to Admiral Letsky. This is a telegram sent by Admiral Krapovich before the communicator was captured. The demise of the Second Guards Army was inevitable, but Admiral Krapovich did not want Admiral Letsky to repeat his mistakes. After all, after the Second Guards Army was in trouble, the Ninth Army did its best to rescue it. Damn it. A group army of 200,000 people was eaten by the Germans in just 3 days. When did the damned Germans become so powerful? Admiral Risky couldn't help scolding Rode. Although, in the process of fighting against the German 20th Army, he already knew how powerful the German army was. However, he was not as shocked as the destruction of the Second Guards Army in such a short period of time. General, what should we do now? After the Germans ate up the Second Guards Army, the next target must be us. Order the troops to retreat immediately. We can no longer stay in the Kingdom of Poland and return to the Southwest Front Army. Admiral Letsky immediately issued an order. In the case that the Second Guards Army has been wiped out, if the Ninth Army remains in the Kingdom of Poland to fight against the Germans, it will be no different from courting death. In order to keep himself and his troops, Admiral Letsky had to order a retreat. At any rate, there are hundreds of thousands of Russian troops in the Southwest Front Army. If you can join them, your own safety is undoubtedly guaranteed. As for the order of Tsar Nicholas II, it can only be violated. After all, at this time, keeping one's own life and troops is the most important thing. Admiral Letsky also knew that even His Majesty the Tsar would certainly understand him. Admiral Ivan Jelinsky, who was waiting for reinforcement in Warsaw, was selectively ignored by Admiral Letsky. He was already very dissatisfied with Admiral Ivan Jelinsky. If that guy hadn't given orders indiscriminately, they wouldn't have been defeated by the Germans so quickly. It can be said that Admiral Ivan Jelinsky is definitely the chief culprit for the destruction of the Second Guards Army and the crisis of the Ninth Army. Yes, General. The Russian general immediately went to make arrangements. Oh, I really don't know if we can win this battle. The Germans are so powerful, it is really unwise to provoke this enemy. Admiral Letsky shook his head. However, the war has already begun, and it may not be so easy to end it. As soldiers of the Russian Empire, all they can do is to do their best to win the Russian Empire. The Russian Ninth Army, which suffered heavy losses in Seedles, began to retreat directly. It's just that their strength has been weakened a lot compared to when they just entered the Kingdom of Poland. In Seedles, the Russian Ninth Army lost at least 50,000 people. However, if the remaining hundreds of thousands of people can safely evacuate the Kingdom of Poland and join the Southwest Front Army, Admiral Letsky will be very satisfied. As for the lost troops, it is nothing to Russia at all, and they can replenish them at any time. By the time the Russian mobilization was gradually completed, they were no longer short of men. Chekhanov, the headquarters of the German 8th Army. There is already laughter here. The Russian Second Guards Army was almost wiped out by the German 8th Army. This is undoubtedly a great victory for the entire legion, Your Highness. According to our estimates, only 5,000 people from the 2nd Russian Guards Army escaped at most. The rest were either killed or captured by us. Known as the most elite Russian army, half of the guards of the army have been eliminated by us. Admiral Hindenburg smiled. Currently, the guards of the Russian army can be called the most elite unit of the Russian army. There are only 2 army groups in total, with more than 400,000 people. But now, a group army was easily eaten by them. It is conceivable what a blow this was to the Russian army, and Tsar Nicholas I. Qin Tian smiled and nodded. It would be great if Nicholas II could also send the 1st Guards Army to the front. In this case, we may soon be able to win the victory over Russia. What Qin Tian meant was naturally referring to the Russian Cloth Party he secretly supported. If the Cloth Party can launch an uprising in Russia and plunge Russia into chaos, then Germany may only be one step away from winning this war. After Russia is resolved, the remaining Britain and France will no longer be able to put so much pressure on Germany without having to fight on two fronts. Qin Tian believed that with the strength of Germany in this time and space, the war would definitely be won. After all, although the German army did not fight smoothly on the Western Front, it still has the initiative in general. Even the Battle of the Marne River launched by Little Moltke now, the German army would not be able to win, and would even suffer heavy losses. But for the powerful German army, this is not a traumatic loss. As long as you prepare again, you can definitely defeat the British and French allied forces. As for the German navy, it now has an absolute advantage in the Atlantic Ocean. British were already on the verge of being hanged by the German navy. As long as the German navy wins again in the future decisive battle at sea, then there is no suspense for Germany to win the final victory of this war. Therefore, Qin Tian is very optimistic about the future situation. Your Highness, the 1st Guards Army is Nicholas II's old base. It is the main force defending the surrounding area of St. Petersburg. I'm afraid he will not dispatch the 1st Guards Army so easily. Major General Ludendorff thought, thinking it is not so easy to mobilize the 1st Guards Army of the Russian army. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 284, The Air Team is dispatched. The 1st Russian Guards Army, as the ace unit of Tsar Nicholas II, is undoubtedly a very elite unit. However, that is relative. In front of the German 8th Army, this is not an elite at all. The same troops, the 8th Army can use their own strength to deal with 2 or 3. It is true that the 1st Guards Army cannot be easily mobilized. However, we have to find a way to get the 1st Guards Front Army to be transferred out. Tsar Nicholas II can't make up his mind, so we will help him make up his mind. Qin Tian said. Your Highness, what can you do? Admiral Hindenburg asked. If, after we have eliminated the Russian 9th Army, we cooperate with the Austro-Hungarian Empire to eliminate the Russian Southwest Front Army, I don't believe that under such circumstances, Nicholas II can still sit still. Qin Tian's eyes flashed a trace of cruelty. General Hindenburg and Major General Ludendorff both nodded repeatedly, thinking that this method is undoubtedly very feasible. Your Highness, if we can really cooperate with the Austro-Hungarian Empire to eliminate the Russian Southwest Front Army, then Nicholas II is really likely to send out the 1st Guards Front Army, if he has to. Hindenburg said the admiral. Russia's standing army is 1.4 million. In addition to the 400,000 guards, there are millions of troops deployed in other regions. After the war broke out, Russia carried out general mobilization on the one hand, and on the other hand mobilized the standing army to take the lead in launching the attack. It can be said that 80% of the standing army other than the guards are assembled in the Northwest Front Army and the Southwest Front Army. If the German 8th Army eats up the Russian Northwest Front Army, and eats up both the 2nd Guards Army and the Russian 9th Army, and also solves the Russian Southwest Front Army by the way, it is tantamount to the standing army of the Russian army was almost wiped out. This is undoubtedly a devastating blow to the Russian army. The loss of so many troops will inevitably make the Russian army unable to defend the vast territory. Even if they mobilized a large number of troops, how could those hastily formed second-line troops be opponents of the German army and the Austro-Hungarian army? Although the Austro-Hungarian army cannot beat the Russian standing army, there is no reason why they can't even beat the second-line troops of the Russian army. Coupled with the wolf like the German army, the Russians are even more of an opponent. In order to stabilize the situation on the front line, Nicholas II will inevitably transfer the 1st Guards Army to the front line, and this gave the Russian Cloth Party and other organizations and forces dissatisfied with the Russian government an excellent opportunity. As long as they take the opportunity to launch an uprising, civil strife in Russia is inevitable. It is even possible to overthrow that Tsarist government like another time and space. If the Cloth Party can win the civil strife and grasp the state power, Then, Germany will be able to quickly win the Eastern Front and gain huge benefits. The German troops withdrawn from the Eastern Front can all be thrown into the Western Front. Qin Tian believed that defeating the British and French allied forces would not be a problem at all. Your Highness, the 9th Army of the Russian Army has already begun to retreat. The 20th Army is in pursuit. However, the strength of the 20th Army is still too small. Major General Ludendorff said, "Let the 11th Army, the 17th Army, and the 8th Armored Division all pursue it. No matter what, the most important thing right now is to eat up the Russian 9th Army. As for dealing with the Russian Southwest Front Army, it is only necessary to cooperate with the Austro-Hungarian Empire. I will ask the Ministry of the Army and the General Staff to contact the Austro-Hungarian Empire." Qin Tian said, "Yes, Your Highness." Major General Ludendorff nodded. "Let the 8th Air Force dispatch to bomb the Russian 9th Army and slow down their retreat as much as possible." Qin Tian continued. "Once the Russian 9th Army retreats, preventing them from retreating becomes the most important thing for the German 8th Army." Qin Tian had already considered that, while the ground troops were chasing them, he would send out an air force that had already formed combat effectiveness to attack the Russian army. In this case, it will undoubtedly play a big role. Although, it is impossible to destroy the Russian 9th Army by means of airstrikes. But as long as they can delay their retreat and buy enough time for the 8th Army to successfully catch up with the Russian 9th Army, it will be a victory. Yes, Your Highness. The 8th Air Force under the 8th Army of the German Army has so far owned nearly 300 combat aircraft, of which the number of fighters and bombers each accounted for half. In addition to having a large airport in Königsberg, there are also military airports in the east and south of East Prussia. Because of the existence of Qin Tian, Germany has always been at the leading level in the world in the field of aviation. Whether it is an F-2 fighter jet or an H-1 bomber, they are definitely ahead of other countries' fighter jets. This can be seen from the air forces of Britain, France and other countries that the German Air Force killed on the Western Front. It's just that, compared to other colleagues who have massacred on the Western Front and achieved one victory after another, the officers and soldiers of the 8th Air Force are a little depressed. You know, they are among the various air teams of the German army, the first one to be established, the one with the best flying skills, and the one with the strongest combat effectiveness. Originally, everyone thought that they could make contributions in this war and let the whole world know their strength. But unfortunately, because the Russian army does not have any decent air power, they are also useless as heroes. Apart from serving as a reconnaissance mission, there is no chance of dispatching at all. Of course, there is no other way. The Russians don't have many planes, so they can't consume precious aviation fuel and fly to the sky to hunt birds, right? General, an order from His Royal Highness the Crown Prince. Königsberg, the headquarters of the German 8th Air Force. The office of Commander Brigadier General Kory was pushed away. However, Brigadier General Kory doesn't have the heart to blame the adjutant for breaking in without his permission. He snatched the telegram from the adjutant's hand and read it. Haha, that's great. We finally have a chance to go to the battlefield. Order all pilots and aircraft, get ready. After half an hour, take off to fight. Brigadier General Kory ordered. Yes, General. The pilots of the German 8th Air Force have already made preparations. After receiving the order, it can take off to soon fight. Chapter 285, Airstrike. Everyone, this time our mission is to strike at the Russian 9th Army that escaped from Seedles. Although, this is only a ground strike mission. However, I hope that every pilot can pay attention. This is our 8th Army after the establishment of the Air Force. His Royal Highness the Crown Prince gave us the first combat order, and I hope we can successfully complete this mission. Brigadier General Kory personally gave a combat briefing to the pilots. All the pilots have serious faces. However, their excitement could still be seen from his face. Everyone has been looking forward to this combat operation for a long time. The Russians were defeated by us in the Kingdom of Poland. The 2nd Guards Army has been eaten by us. However, the 9th Army of the Russian Army wants to escape. Can we take this Russian army? It's up to you to eat it too. Your Highness the Crown Prince has placed high hopes on us. Therefore, I hope that you can use your best efforts to repay the support of Your Highness the Crown Prince. Brigadier General Kory said. Yes, General. All pilots replied. Very well, everyone go down and prepare. Then execute the order immediately. Brigadier General Corey nodded in satisfaction. Yes, General. The pilots dispersed. In the hangar, the crew is filling the aircraft with aviation fuel, adding bombs and aviation machine gun bullets, and preparing for takeoff. Some planes that had been prepared were pushed onto the runway, and they could take off after the order to take off was issued. Soon, Brigadier General Corey gave the order to take off. The first to take off was the 81st Fighter Group. The entire brigade, 36 F-2 fighters, except 4 spare planes, all took off. Under the wings of these F-2 fighter jets, aerial bombs weighing up to 25 kilograms are hung to perform ground strike missions. Of course, the biggest threat of these fighter jets to the troops on the ground is not bombs, but the 12.7mm aviation machine gun equipped on the nose. Compared with the 2 bombs under the wing, the aviation machine gun has hundreds of rounds of ammunition. This is enough to make these fighters wreak havoc on the battlefield. The power of the 12.7mm aviation machine gun is already great. Once it hits the human body, I'm afraid that the fragile human body will be broken into 2 pieces on the spot. It is conceivable that once these fighter jets launch an attack on the escaped Russian 9th Army, what will happen? After the 81st Fighter Group took off, the 82nd Bomber Group took off immediately. 36 H-1 bombers, like rocks spreading their wings, rushed into the sky driven by the strong power of the engines, and flew towards the southern sky. The remaining 83rd Fighter Battalion, 84th Bomber Battalion, 85th Fighter Battalion and 86th Bomber Battalion will take off one after another within the next 2 hours, to ensure the continuity of the attack on the Russian 9th Army. At this moment, the 9th Army of the Russian Army is unaware that the threat has come. They are retreating from Seedles. General, all the divisions of the entire group army have retreated now. However, the Germans did not continue to stick to Seedles, but chased them out directly. Shall we launch an attack on them and eat up this German army? Defense: when attacking, they can rely on strong firepower to resist us. But when attacking, they may not be sure. A lieutenant general suggested. Admiral Letsky shook his head. The Germans are not easy to mess with, even with an army of only tens of thousands of people. If we turn around and attack them, we may not be able to attack them in a very short time. Defeat and eliminate them. Don't forget, the main force of the German army must also start chasing us. If the battle cannot be resolved quickly, once the main force of the Germans chases us, we will not even think about retreating. At that time, the 2nd Guard the Army Group is our role model. Yes, the general is right. Since you want to retreat, you must retreat quickly, and you can't change your mind casually. We have to guard against the lessons learned by the 2nd Guards Army. Another lieutenant general also said. Leave 2 infantry divisions to stop the pursuing German army. The other departments should retreat at a faster speed. As long as we can withdraw from the Kingdom of Poland and join the Southwest Front Army before the main force of the Germans catch up, we will be safe. Let's Admiralski ordered. In his opinion, there were only tens of thousands of German troops pursuing them. There are also more than 30,000 people in the 2 Russian infantry divisions. Of course, in terms of combat effectiveness, it is not an opponent of the Germans. However, if you want to defend, you should be able to withstand the German attack. No matter how bad it is, they can persist for 2 or 3 days to buy enough time for their retreat. Yes, General. The generals answered one after another. The 9th Army of the Russian army fled in embarrassment this time. However, they no longer care about that much. As long as the main force can evacuate safely, this is a victory for them. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, hundreds of thousands of Russian troops retreated south along several roads. The long queue spread far and far along the road, like a long snake that was constantly wriggling forward. In the northern sky, small black dots appeared one after another. At the same time, there is also a buzzing sound, just like bees flying. Some Russian soldiers could not help but look up to the sky to see what was going on. What is that? A Russian soldier exclaimed. Other Russian soldiers also made noise. A Russian officer looked at the northern sky with a telescope. Suddenly, his expression changed drastically. Damn. The German plane. The German plane is coming. The Russian officer shouted in horror. But those Russian soldiers looked at a loss. Most of them were just farmers before joining the army. I don't know a single big character, and I don't have much culture. Very few people have ever seen an airplane. Naturally, I don't know how terrifying these planes are. There were even quite a few Russian troops pointing at the planes in the sky, thinking it was a miracle. There are countless people who pray to God devoutly. The Russians have been found. Launch an attack. The captain of the 81st Fighter Battalion gave the order to attack. 36 F-2 fighters began to lower their altitude and prepare for battle. The fighter piloted by the captain launched the attack first. Orange flames shone on the muzzle of the aviation machine gun, and dense bullets shot towards the Russian army on the ground. Puff, puff, ah, ah. The sound of bullets hitting the human body, and the screams followed one after another, and a long line of Russian soldiers fell to the ground amidst the screams. Chapter 286. Lost heavily. The German fighter jets in the sky opened fire one after another, using dense aviation machine gun bullets to strafe the Russian troops on the ground. For a while, the screams were endless. Countless Russian soldiers fell to the ground under the strafing of German aviation machine guns and suffered heavy casualties. Run away. The German planes will kill us all. Countless Russian soldiers, screaming, fled the road and fled to the crop fields or woods on both sides of the road, trying to avoid the pursuit from the sky. An F-2 fighter jet passed over the head of the Russian army, mounted 2 small bombs under the wing, then dropped them and fell into the Russian army's queue. Boom. Boom. The bomb exploded, killing more than a dozen Russian soldiers on the spot, and countless others were injured. Facing the massacre of German planes, the Russian army on the ground was simply unable to fight back. Apart from running away in all directions, they have no way to deal with it. Countless Russian soldiers fell under the guns of German planes. Because of the performance of the aircraft, it did not carry many bullets and bombs. Therefore, in less than 10 minutes before and after, the fighters of the 81st Fighter Brigade of the German 8th Air Force had to return because they ran out of bullets. However, the 36 F-2 fighter jets of the 81st Fighter Battalion caused at least thousands of casualties to the Russian army. This kind of strike ability is undoubtedly very terrifying. Moreover, the panic they caused to the Russian army was even more serious. Many Russian soldiers had already peed their pants, let alone continue to fight. This is just the beginning. Once the 3 fighter brigades and 3 bomber brigades of the 8th Air Force take turns to launch airstrikes against the Russian army, it is natural to imagine what kind of effect it will have. After the German planes left, the Russian army began to gather troops. It is not an easy task to find the panicked Russian soldiers from the woods and crop fields, and then set off in formation again. Especially when these Russian soldiers have been terrified, it will undoubtedly take a lot of time. When the Russian army completed the whole team again, and continued to march along the road, in the northern sky, German planes appeared again. This time, those Russian soldiers seemed to have become frightened. They didn't need the officer's order, they immediately dispersed, desperately looking for a place to hide. The tragic death of those comrades who were shot and killed by German fighter jets almost scared them out of their wits. The aircraft that arrived on the battlefield this time were no longer F-2 fighter jets, but 36 H-1 bombers from the 82nd Bomber Group. These bombers are not only much larger than fighter jets, but also carry more powerful weapons. Each H-1 bomber carried 20 aerial bombs weighing 25 kilograms. Lower the altitude and drop the bomb at a height of 300 meters. The commander ordered. Immediately, 36 H-1 fighter jets began to lower their heights one after another. When they were only 300 meters above the ground, those huge planes could already be clearly seen on the ground. Many Russian soldiers were even more frightened with pale faces. The Germans even have such a huge plane. How could we beat the Germans? This has undoubtedly become the common aspiration of many Russian soldiers. When the German bomber flew over the heads of the Russian army, the magazine had already been opened, and the bombs fell to the ground one by one, like dumplings. What are those? Is the plane laying eggs? A Russian soldier asked stupidly. Idiot. The German plane dropped a bomb. Get down. A Russian officer yelled, and fell to the ground first. Boom. 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 As the bombs dropped by the German bombers fell, intensive explosions occurred on the ground. In the continuous explosions, many Russian soldiers were torn to pieces. The Russian soldiers who saw this scene were all stunned in shock. They became the first batch of people to experience intensive bombing in this time and space, and they were all frightened stupid by the huge power. Of course, in fact, the 36 H-1 bombers of the German army did not cause too much loss to the Russian army. The number of Russian soldiers who died in the bombing was no more than 1,000. For the Russian 9th Army, which has hundreds of thousands of troops, such a small loss is nothing at all. What really makes the Russian army unbearable is the blow to the morale of the troops and the time that has been lost. Throughout the afternoon of September 14th, the bomber brigades and fighter brigades of the German 8th Air Force took turns to attack the Russian army. More than 5,000 people died in the airstrikes of the 8th Air Force. What's more, they also caused many wounded to the Russian army. As long as the generals of the Russian army will not abandon the wounded, they will have to spend more people to evacuate the wounded. In this case, the retreat speed of the Russian army can be further delayed. Facing the pursuit of the main force of the German 8th Army, the commander of the Russian 9th Army, General Letsky, originally wanted to withdraw quickly. In this case, although the Russian 9th Army will lose a considerable part of its troops, it will at least retain its main force, and will not lose its combat effectiveness. However, the 8th Army of the German army will never be willing to give up this opportunity to eliminate the main force of the Russian army. Therefore, they will stop the withdrawal of the Russian army at all costs. It is an important means to use the Air Force to launch airstrikes against the Russian 9th Army and delay their withdrawal speed. That afternoon, under the air attack of the German 8th Air Force, the retreat speed of the Russian 9th Army was seriously delayed. In the whole afternoon, they only marched for more than 10 kilometers. General Letsky, the commander of the 9th Army of the Russian army, after learning of this situation, his face became even darker, like the bottom of the pot. General, the Germans are constantly dispatching planes to attack us. The loss of the troops is very large. And, what's more serious, the marching speed of the troops has been seriously delayed. If this is the case, within a few days, the Germans, the main force of the army, will catch up. A lieutenant general said. Admiral Letsky nodded. Indeed, we never thought that the Germans still had such powerful planes, let alone that they would use planes to slow down our marching speed. Do you have any ideas about this? A group of generals of the Russian army. You look at me, I look at you, but no one speaks. They really don't know how to solve the current dilemma they are facing. Chapter 287. There is no way to escape. General, if it's not possible, let's go day and night. The German planes can only be dispatched during the day, and at night, there is nothing we can do about it. We can march at night, and let the troops hide in the woods during the day. In this way it can effectively reduce the loss of troops. A major general and division commander suggested. This is a good way. It is impossible for German planes to be dispatched at night. Someone immediately echoed. However, if we march at night, the speed will be seriously affected. The Germans are now chasing us. If our retreat speed is slow, we may be caught up by the Germans soon. Some generals, I'm a little worried. That's better than being attacked by German planes during the day. This afternoon, the troops didn't walk 10 kilometers in the whole afternoon. According to this calculation, I'm afraid it's not as much as one night. Besides, the Germans keep dispatching airplanes attacking. We would be a devastating blow to our morale. Admiral Letsky frowned, listening to the opinions of his subordinates. What everyone said is very reasonable. Next, it depends on how he, the commander, should choose. Tonight, drive through the night. Let the ministries do a good job of organizing to prevent the soldiers from falling behind. Tomorrow, within an hour of dawn, complete the concealment. After the sun goes down, continue on the road. Admiral Letsky made a choice. In the end, he chose to travel by day and night. Avoid direct attack by German aircraft. This is really because the attack power of the German planes is so terrifying that it frightened Letsky. 5,000 people were lost in one afternoon. If they were also attacked in the morning, wouldn't it be tens of thousands of people lost in one day? The entire 9th Army will collapse if it can't last for a few days. Admiral Letsky did not dare to take such a risk. As for the speed of marching at night will be affected, it can only be compensated by increasing the speed as much as possible. This is already the safest way that Admiral Letsky can think of. That night, the Russian Ninth Army did not rest, but continued on its way. This made the Russian soldiers who were already frightened during the day very tired. However, under the persuasion of the officer and the threat of the whip, the Russian soldiers had no choice but to hurry on their way. Of course, fear of being attacked by German planes again during the day tomorrow is also a major reason. In the afternoon, the attack of German planes frightened them. Don't want to be torn to pieces by German planes like those unlucky comrades in arms. Throughout the night, the Russian army was on their way. By the time the sun rose the next day, everyone was exhausted. Admiral Letsky ordered that all ministries find places to hide to avoid German airstrikes. A large number of Russian troops immediately disappeared from the road without a trace, hid in the woods and valleys, concealed their own people as much as possible, and avoided their indiscriminate bombing once discovered by the Germans. The next day, the fighter planes of the German 8th Air Force continued to take off, searching southward along the road like yesterday, looking for traces of the Russian army. These planes are all equipped with aviation machine gun bullets and bombs. Once they find the Russian army, they will inevitably set off another **** storm. However, what puzzled these pilots was that they searched all the way, but found no trace of the Russian army. What's going on? Where did the Russians go? Why can't they be found? Could it be that those Russians can't fly? They went to places beyond our range overnight? Brigadier General Kory, the commander of the 8th Air Force, was also very surprised when he learned of this situation. Originally, he was still complacent about the results he achieved yesterday, wishing that he could achieve even greater results in today's actions. However, all the Russians disappeared, which made him dumbfounded all of a sudden. If the Russians can't be found, not only will the military exploits they have obtained slip away like this, but it will also make them unable to complete the tasks assigned by Qin Tian. This is a big problem. Contact the pilots in front and search with all your strength. I don't believe that the Russians ran away overnight. It's impossible. They must be hiding in some hidden places to avoid being hit by our fighter planes. Kory, the brigadier, said through gritted teeth. Yes, General. The adjutant immediately went to give the order. The pilots of the German army searched everywhere for traces of the Russian army. Knowing that the fuel was not enough, I returned. They have no choice. If they don't return, the fuel will not be enough to support them to return to the airport safely. In the end, there is only one way to crash. Watching the German planes constantly flying overhead, the Russian soldiers hid in the woods one by one, not even daring to breathe out, for fear of disturbing the planes in the sky. For this reason, the Russian army did not dare to light a fire, and could only eat dark bread in cold water. Such conditions are naturally very bad. Don't dare. Even so, it is not so easy to hide hundreds of thousands of people, and there are still many Russian soldiers exposed. What awaited them was the strafing of fighter jets and the bombing of bombers by the German Air Force. The fighter jets were over the woods, firing wildly. Although most of the bullets hit the trees, they still achieved some results. The bombing of the bomber, also because of the obstruction of the trees, had little effect. Of course, it still caused certain casualties to the Russian army more or less. The Russian army adopted such a marching method, which of course made the 8th Air Force lose the target of the attack, and the results of the battle could not be further expanded. However, after Qin Tian learned about it, he was not too worried. He ordered the troops of the German 8th Army to continue to pursue the Russian army. Since the Russian army wanted to move day and night and slow down their retreat, it was exactly as the 8th Army wished. While the retreat speed of the Russian army is decreasing, the pursuit speed of the 8th Army is increasing. A large number of trucks were dispatched from the rear to transport a large number of personnel and equipment to the southern part of the Kingdom of Poland, preparing to borrow the retreat of the Russian 9th Army. 4-car wheels, the speed is undoubtedly much faster than 2 legs. If the Russian Cossack cavalry and infantry were scattered, they might not be able to stop them. However, the cavalry and infantry of the Russian army were on their way together, and that was undoubtedly their own death. On September 16th, the 8th Armored Division of the German 8th Army and an infantry division of the 11th Army seized Pilori and blocked the road from which the Russian army could not escape. Chapter 288, Desperate Charge. Pilori, a small city on the banks of the Vistula River, is also the only way for the Russian army to go south. Through here, march southeast for another day, and you will be able to reach Lublin. and it is not far from Lublin to the location of the Russian Southwest Front Army. It's just that Pilori is now under the control of the German Army, the 8th Armored Division, and the 24th Infantry Division of the 11th Army, which took a detour south in trucks, arrived first, and this important city was seized. The German Army also paid a high price in order to seize Pilori first. In the 8th Armored Division alone, there were less than 100 tanks that could still be activated after arriving in Pilori. This is the result of the armored soldiers searching for good parts to replace on the corpses of other tanks. Otherwise, the figure would have to be cut in half. But even so, they have successfully achieved their strategic goals. After blocking the path of the Russian 9th Army going south, the next thing to do is to tighten your pockets and get rid of them. Just an hour after the German army occupied Pilori, a group of Cossack cavalry appeared in Pilori. However, when they saw the German army digging fortifications outside the city, their faces changed drastically, and they fled away immediately. The news of the German occupation of Pilori quickly reached Admiral Letsky. "Asshole. How can the speed of the Germans be so fast?" Admiral Risky seemed unable to accept this result. After all, according to his expectation, even if they were traveling at night, their retreat speed would slow down. But they had an advantage of more than a day from the main force of the German army. In the opinion of Admiral Letsky, they were completely able to escape the Kingdom of Poland before the main force of the German army caught up. But I didn't expect it, but now it has fallen short. General, the Cossack cavalry has been confirmed. Pilori fell into the hands of the Germans. A cavalry division commander said, "General, why don't we cross the Vistula River? Then go down the Vistula River?" Someone suggested. "It doesn't work. We are only 20 kilometers away from Pilori. Once we cross the river, the Germans will surely know. They only need to follow us across the river, and they will be able to intercept us again. What's more, once the Germans attack, while we are crossing the river, the situation will be even more unfavorable to us," retorted one of the generals. "Could it be that we are just waiting to die here?" Some generals muttered dissatisfied. "General, why don't we take advantage of the fact that the Germans have just arrived in Pilori and their foothold is still unstable, so let's launch an attack immediately. The Germans are digging fortifications. With their technology, if they are given a certain amount of time, they will definitely be able to dig out solid fortifications. Fortifications. At that time, we will really be unable to fly. Take advantage of the present, launch an attack immediately, and maybe have a chance to break through the blocking of the Germans," a cavalry division commander suggested. "Yes. In Seedles, the Germans told us with their powerful firepower how terrible it would be if we took the initiative to attack them. We absolutely cannot strengthen the Pilori line of defense for the Germans' opportunity," a commander of the infantry corps echoed. This suggestion has been supported by other generals. Everyone believes that only by launching an offensive now can they have a chance to break through the German defense line, and then it is possible to asterisk Pilori and escape. If it is delayed for a while, the German army will build a solid defense line in Pilori, and at the same time, the German army's pursuit will get closer and closer. At that time, they really have no chance at all. General, you can't hesitate any longer. If you hesitate any longer, it will be even more harmful to us, Admiral. Letsky thought for a while, then nodded. "Okay, launch an attack on Pilori immediately. Tell the soldiers that, if you want to survive, you have to take down Pilori. Otherwise, everyone has only one dead end." "Yes, General." After Admiral Letsky gave the order, the 9th Russian Army immediately took action, and the remaining more than 100,000 people in the entire army began to march south, preparing to take Pilori in one go. General Letsky also believed that, although the German army was ahead of them and seized Pilori, it should be only a small force, and could not be the main force. Therefore, naturally, if the Russian army launches an offensive with all its strength, it is entirely possible for him to take Pilori. 2 hours later, the Russian army arrived in Pilori. At this time, the German army was still building fortifications. Although the German soldiers have worked very hard, they haven't even dug the trenches yet. As for the others, there was no time to build them. In the eyes of the rigorous Germans, such fortifications are unfinished and unqualified. But alas, the Russians won't give them enough time to build the fortifications anymore. The battle is about to start. Because the Russians knew that, if the Germans built the fortifications, it would be even more impossible for them to retake Pilori and escape. Warriors of the Russian Empire, now we are blocked in front, and pursued in the back. If we don't fight hard, everyone will die. The Germans are cruel, and will never let you live. Therefore, only by breaking through the German defense line can we have a chance of survival. The front is the German defense line. We have no way out. The low-level officers of the Russian army constantly brainwash the panicked soldiers, arouse their fighting spirit, and let them fight desperately in the next battle. Only in this way, there may be a slight chance of winning. Otherwise, there is really no chance at all. Those soldiers of the Russian army, although they are uneducated, are not fools. After these few battles, they also knew that the Russian army was no match for the Germans. Now they are about to be completely eaten by the Germans. Therefore, they had no other choice but to follow the orders of the officers and continue to attack until they were pierced by German bullets and went to God. Attack. When the commander of the Russian army gave the order to attack, 20,000 Russian soldiers participated in this wave of offensive. Despair was written on their originally insensitive faces. All Russian soldiers who have participated in the Battle of Seedless know that attacking the German defense line is nothing like courting death. Allah. Allah. The soldiers of the Russian army, shouting slogans loudly, launched an attack on the German positions. Although, they know that such an attack is no different from courting death. However, they have no choice. Chapter 289, Sent to Death. Damn it, the Russians have launched an attack before our fortifications have been built. If this happens, our casualties will continue to rise. A middle-aged junior general officer looked angry. He is Major General Besson, commander of the 24th Infantry Division of the German Army. General, there is no way. The Russians are not fools. They know that once our defense line is completed, if they attack again, they will have to pay for their lives. Besides, it is no different from courting death. As long as the Russians, if our brains were not caught by the door, they would not give us more time. A young colonel officer said helplessly. He is Colonel Guderian, commander of the 8th Armored Division. Well, but even so, the Russians don't even think about taking Pilori back. His Highness asked us to stay here for 2 days. We can definitely do it, Major General Besson said confidently. Even so, the loss in this battle may exceed his previous expectations. However, Major General Besson still believed that the elite German army could be firmly nailed here like a nail until the main force arrived. Yes, General, I think so too. Once the Russian army's offensive is too fierce, the 8th Armored Division will dispatch tanks to crush the Russians directly. I believe that we can defeat their plot. Colonel Guderian is full of confidence. After several battles in succession, the 8th Armored Division was able to win every time, which has become synonymous with victory. This also made Colonel Guderian more and more confident. Major General Besson nodded. If it was only the 24th Infantry Division, he believed that, even if he could stop the Russian army, he would suffer heavy losses. However, with the assistance of the 8th Armored Division, everything was different. Even if the 8th Armored Division lost a lot of tanks, the remaining hundreds of tanks would also become a nightmare for the Russians. It is absolutely impossible for the Russians to break through their defenses. Fire. Boom. 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 The artillery of the 24th Infantry Division of the German Army opened fire. The 18 150mm heavy howitzers, 36 105mm light howitzers and 54 75mm field guns that had already entered the artillery positions began to fire wildly. One by one shells roared and smashed into the Russian army's queue. The shell exploded instantly like the sickle of death and took away all the lives of the nearby Russian soldiers, leaving only the stumped limbs and a deep crater on the ground. The artillery of the infantry division of the German 8th Army has undoubtedly been greatly improved compared with the infantry divisions of other countries. An infantry division is equipped with 108 cannons of various calibers, and even 150mm heavy guns. Except for the local tyrants of the American Empire on the other side of the ocean, they are probably the only ones. Of course, this certainly cost a lot of money. However, in the war, so many powerful artillery also played a huge role. Whether it is offensive or defensive operations, the first thing the enemy has to face is their terrifying artillery fire. This can not only cause a lot of casualties to the enemy, but also a major blow to the morale of the enemy. The shells fell like raindrops, killing and wounding Russian soldiers continuously. Even though the soldiers of the Russian army were still launching the Ulat charge, the fear on the faces of every Russian soldier was getting deeper and deeper. Although, the defense line of the German 24th Infantry Division has not yet been built. However, the firepower it should have is not bad. Mortars, grenades, general purpose machine guns and squad machine guns are all available. It's just that these weapons cannot be deployed in a solid firepower point, they can only be deployed directly on the trenches. But at the same time, the power of these weapons can also be brought into play. Fire and kill these Russians. Following the order of the frontline commander, mortars, grenade launchers, general purpose machine guns, and squad machine guns started firing one after another. The intensive firepower directly caused the attacking Russian army to pay a heavy price. Countless Russian soldiers screamed and fell to the ground. Their bodies were full of holes left by bullets. Even some Russian soldiers were directly torn to pieces. The firepower of the Germans is too powerful. It would be a real disadvantage to fight against such an army without strong firepower. A Russian general put down the binoculars in his hand and said with emotion, "The whole of Europe and the whole world, perhaps only the Germans, have the capital to equip their troops with such powerful firepower. I heard that even the German army is not equipped with such equipment. Only the 8th Army is equipped with such powerful firepower." The generals of the Russian army started talking about this. Although the German army is massacring their soldiers with powerful firepower, this does not prevent their envy. They even imagined that, if their troops could also be equipped with such powerful firepower, maybe they would not have suffered such a miserable defeat. Of course, this is just a thought. They all know that with Russia's financial resources, it is simply impossible for the Russian army to equip so many extravagant equipment. Besides, the advantage of the Russian army does not lie in its weapons and equipment, but in its strength. Overwhelming the enemy with a huge force advantage is what they are good at. The soldiers of the Russian army were very brave. They faced the intensive firepower of the German army and launched an offensive. However, such an attack is more like sending to death. The lives of the soldiers of the Russian army seems to be worthless at all. Perhaps their greatest role is to consume the ammunition of the German army. The German 8th Air Force also came to help. These pilots are already full of anger towards the Russians. The Russian army adopted the tactics of day and night, which almost made them useless. They don't want to be spectators in this war. Therefore, after learning that the Russian army launched an attack on Puloi, Brigadier General Kory, the commander of the 8th Air Force, immediately asked Qin Tian to fight. And Qin Tian also approved their battle request. 2 brigades of F-2 fighters and 1 brigade of H-1 bombers appeared over the battlefield. Their arrival made the Russian army on the ground panic, and many even turned around and ran away. The Russian army, which was not intimidated by the intensive firepower of the German army, was frightened by the German aircraft on the contrary. However, the pilots of the 8th Air Force will obviously not let the Russians go so easily. They attacked immediately. Da-da-da. The bullets of the aviation machine guns of the F-2 fighter jets chased the Russian army, and countless Russian soldiers were torn to pieces under the impact of the powerful aviation machine gun bullets. The H-1 bomber also began to drop bombs, throwing the bombs into the queue of the Russian army like dumplings, taking their lives away. Chapter 290, Last Strike. In this world, there is no truly fearless army. In other words, bravery is only a relative term. When facing an enemy with comparable combat strength, if you attack bravely, you may be able to win. However, when the disparity in strength between the two sides is very large, no matter how hard you try, it will be in vain. The current situation on the battlefield is like this. The Russian army's offensive was very fierce. Stimulated by the desire to survive, those Russian soldiers fought as if they were dying. But even so, they were still powerless in the face of the German army, which was armed to the teeth and also had air support. Their attack was just looking for death. Under the air attack of the German 8th Air Force, the offensive of the Russian 9th Army was completely disintegrated. A large number of Russian soldiers ran away like hell, and they didn't have the courage to continue fighting. German planes, especially those F-2 fighter jets, chased and fired at the fleeing Russian soldiers, killing them wantonly with aviation machine guns. Countless Russian soldiers were beaten in two, and their deaths were extremely miserable. General Letsky and others watched the battle behind the Russian army's position. The scene in front of them made their faces livid. Although they never took the lives of ordinary soldiers seriously, being massacred by the German army still made them feel very uncomfortable. Because they know that, if they can't break through the German defense line and seize Pilori, the Russian soldiers who are now slaughtered by the German army may be a lesson for them. Order the troops to stop the attack. Admiral Letsky ordered. General, are we going to give up? If we give up now, we will never have another chance. A Russian general asked. The Germans have strong firepower, and they also have aircraft to assist in the battle. If we launch an attack now, we will simply die. This will cause all our troops to be lost here. Admiral Letsky shook his head. General, no matter what, we can try again. Maybe, there will be a chance. The Russian general was a little unwilling. Although, the casualties were indeed very large. However, it was just ordinary soldiers who died, so what's the big deal? None of these generals crawled out of the mountain of corpses and the sea of blood. They never paid attention to human life, especially the life of ordinary Russian soldiers. However, Admiral Letsky still shook his head stubbornly. This made the generals of the Russian army very puzzled, and they were a little unhappy. Although Admiral Letsky was his immediate boss, he couldn't stop them from surviving. However, Admiral Letsky's next words made all the dissatisfaction in their hearts disappear. If you launch an attack during the day, you will be attacked by German planes. Therefore, I decided to put all the attacks at night. In that case, not only the German planes will no longer pose a threat to us. At the same time, the German firepower superiority will also offset a lot. In this case, our confidence in breaking through the German defense line will be much greater. Admiral Letsky said. General Letsky asked the Russian army to stop the offensive, not because he wanted to give up. Instead, he intends to change his attack method and choose a tactic that is easier to succeed. Of course, if you can preserve your own strength as much as possible, that would be the best. If they had to pay a huge price to realize their strategic goals, Admiral Letsky would of course not be stingy. After all, he has never been a soft-hearted person. The general is wise. A group of Russian generals immediately flattered. Indeed, Admiral Letsky thought much farther than this. They only thought about how to break through the German defenses and escape. On the other hand, Admiral Letsky wanted to break through the German defense line at the lowest cost. If the two are compared, the judgment will be judged. However, General, if we wait until night, will the main force of the Germans catch up? Some Russian generals were worried. The other generals of the Russian army also felt nervous. Now they don't have so much time to spend here. The main force of the Germans is chasing them. If a lot of time is wasted here, it will not be worth the candle. 1. Night. There shouldn't be any problem. However, if we can't break through the German defense line tonight, the Germans will definitely catch up tomorrow or the day after tomorrow. By then, we will be dead. Leeds Admiral Ski said. The faces of other Russian generals also became serious. Everyone knows that now is really a critical moment of life and death. If the attack tonight is still unsuccessful, then, what kind of consequences will there be? No need for others to say, they are very clear. General, everyone will do their best tonight and fight to the death. It is better to die on the way to attack than to be surrounded and annihilated by the Germans. We will definitely be able to break through the German defense line, a Russian general said. Other Russian generals also expressed their views. Very well, then, our victory or defeat will be tonight. I hope we can break through the German defense line in one fell swoop. May God bless us. Bless the Russian Empire. Admiral Letsky said. God bless the Russian Empire. The other Russian generals also said one after another. The Russian army only launched an offensive, and it died down after being kicked by the thigh, which made the German army a little confused. Major General Besson, commander of the German 24th Infantry Division, and Colonel Guderian, commander of the 8th Armored Division, are also talking about this matter. What did the Russians do? Why did they stop attacking? Don't they know that the current time is very precious to them? If our main force catches up, they will die. Belly Major General Sen looked suspicious. General, the Russians may be scared by our air force. They are afraid that when they attack again, they will be attacked by our air force for the second time. However, the Russians must not be underestimated. They will not give up so easily, Colonel Guderian said. Major General Besson nodded. It seems that the Russians want to save the opportunity to break through tonight. Our two divisions may have to go through a tough battle. Guderian smiled and didn't seem worried. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 291, Sneak Attack Failed. On the night of September 16th, the clouds were very thick, and the moon was completely covered by the clouds, making the night very dark. Although it was not to the point where you couldn't see your fingers, it was impossible to see clearly a little further away. Damn it, tonight is very suitable for night raids, Major General Besson muttered. Yes, General. Therefore, we must be more cautious tonight. I can guarantee that the Russians will launch a sneak attack tonight, Guderian said. Order the troops on the front line to be more vigilant tonight. As long as they survive tonight, the Russians will be unable to fly, Major General Besson ordered. For them, tonight was undoubtedly the most dangerous night. Tomorrow afternoon, the main force will be able to arrive one after another. At that time, the remnants of the Russian 9th Army will all be surrounded by them. It can be said that, as long as we persevere tonight, the German army will be able to win the final victory. Colonel Guderian nodded. General, tonight, I will also make the 8th Armored Division ready for battle. If the Russians really dare to attack, we will directly dispatch tanks to crush them. Well, in that case, it would be the best, Major General Besson said with great satisfaction. With the full support of the 8th Armored Division, it will undoubtedly be more certain to resist the Russian attack tonight. At 10 o'clock in the evening, the Russian army is ready for battle. Admiral Letsky looked up at the clouds in the sky and nodded in satisfaction. In his opinion, this undoubtedly meant that even God was on their side, which made him more confident about tonight's attack. Everyone, are you ready? After half an hour, launch an attack. This time, we must win in one fell swoop, Admiral Letsky ordered. Yes, General. Everyone replied. Half an hour later, the Russian army's offensive began. Without any fire preparations, 3 Russian infantry divisions, with a total of more than 30,000 troops, launched an offensive. In order to avoid being discovered by the German army as much as possible, the more than 30,000 Russian soldiers marched forward without saying a word, with their heads bowed and waists bent. Although their speed is very slow, every Russian soldier tries not to make extra noise as much as possible. During the day, the powerful firepower of the German army gave them a great shock. These Russian soldiers are also worried that once they are discovered by the German army, they will incur a strong firepower attack from the German army. Even if they can safely approach a place 100 or 200 meters away from the German defense line, the possibility of them breaking through the German defense line will greatly increase. However, it is impossible for tens of thousands of people to act together without making any noise at all. Especially when the German army has raised its vigilance, it is even more impossible. After the German frontline troops received the order to strengthen their vigilance, all the soldiers, holding their guns, leaned in the trenches and closed their eyes to rest. The snipers in each squad are responsible for security. Once you find any signs of trouble, you can immediately fire a warning shot. The mortars of each platoon are also required to be vigilant, and the flares are always ready. Once the snipers shoot, they will immediately launch flares, so that they can find the enemy in the first place. The snipers' eyes are originally required to be very good. Even in the dark of night, they can see farther than ordinary people. When the Russian army slowly touched the place less than 300 meters away from the German defense line, a sniper discovered something was wrong. Boom. Clear gunshots sounded, and a Russian soldier suddenly fell to the ground screaming. In the silent night, the sound can always spread far. The crisp gunshots and the screams of Russian soldiers immediately spread far away. Suddenly, on the German position, there was loud gunfire. Flares shot into the sky one after another, and the dazzling white light dispelled the darkness, illuminating the surroundings, as if it were daytime. The densely packed figures of the Russian army also appeared. Da-da-da. The machine gunners, who had stood up earlier, started shooting. A series of general-purpose machine guns and squad machine guns began to pour firepower on the Russian soldiers. The dense rain of bullets enveloped the Russian army like a torrential rain, and immediately caused the attacking Russian soldiers to pay heavy losses. Rows of Russian soldiers fell to the ground, like harvested wheat. The Russian soldiers were all beaten. The order they received was to launch a sneak attack on the German positions. Under the cover of night, they all believed that this sneak attack was very likely to be successful. But I didn't expect that the Germans were obviously prepared. What greeted them was the powerful firepower of the German army. This immediately caused the sneak attacking Russian soldiers to pay an extremely heavy price. Damn it, the Germans were already prepared. Seeing this scene, the Russian generals couldn't help being heartbroken. Order the troops to continue the offensive. At all costs, tear the German defense line. This is our only chance. Admiral Letsky ordered with red eyes. The current him is no different from a gambler who loses his eyes. You know, in order to avoid the German plane attack, he put all his hopes on tonight's attack. If the breakout tonight is not successful, then they will die. General Letsky is definitely not a soft-hearted person, nor is he a person who cherishes the lives of soldiers. In order to win, he can kill all the Russian soldiers. Now, the time has come. Yes, General. Attack. Keep attacking. We are not far from the German defense line. Only by rushing forward, the Germans' powerful firepower will be useless. At that time, victory must belong to us. The Russian officers on the front line are also constantly urging those Russian soldiers to attack. None of them wanted to pass up their chance tonight. Because, for them, this is the last chance. Allah. Allah. The soldiers of the Russian army, under the urging of the officers, and even the threat of punching and kicking, were driven like livestock to the Russian army's position. No one cares about their life or death. In other words, in the eyes of the Russian officers and generals, these Russian soldiers are nothing more than cannon fodder used to consume the ammunition of the German army and achieve their strategic goals. Apart from that, there is no other use. The lives of the soldiers of the Russian army are simply worthless. Chapter 292. Dust settled. Da-da-da. On the German position, a bunch of machine guns are firing crazily, and the barrels have become red from continuous shooting. However, the machine gunner didn't even have time to change the barrel, so he had to choose the most extravagant style of play, i.e. keep firing until the barrel fails. In that case, although the cost will increase, the continuity of shooting will be guaranteed, and the replacement of the barrel will not be so frequent. Boom. 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 Mortars and grenades on the front line are also firing fiercely. One by one, the shells were thrown at the Russian soldiers, as if they didn't want money. Every shell and grenade exploded in the queue of the Russian army would take the lives of a large number of Russian soldiers. The powerful firepower of the German army was brought into full play in the battle. Of course, for the Russian army, this may not be a good thing. Under the powerful and almost abnormal firepower of the German army, they have already paid extremely heavy casualties. The corpses of the Russian soldiers piled up a thick layer in front of the German positions at a speed almost visible to the naked eye. This speed not only frightened the attacking Russian army, but also shocked the defending German soldiers. Because they all believe that this is no longer a battle. To be precise, it seems more appropriate to describe it as a massacre. That's right, this battle has developed into a battle in which the Russian army died, and the German army slaughtered. This also made the losses of the Russian army begin to rise linearly. General, the troops on the front line have lost too much, and they will soon be unable to hold on. The Germans have been prepared for a long time, and they have been firing flares. Our troops are about to collapse. A Russian general told General Letsky reported. Put in 3 more infantry divisions to launch an attack. Admiral Letsky gritted his teeth and gave the order. Yes, General. The huge loss of the Russian army made all the Russian generals fall silent. Even in their careers, it is probably the first time they have fought such a battle. This battle really made them aggrieved. Also, let the cavalry get ready. If the infantry still can't tear through the German line of defense, it's time for them to go out. Admiral Letsky ordered. The cavalry is the only trump card in his hand. If even the cavalry is dispatched, they cannot break through the German defense line, then there is really no other way. Of course, Admiral Letsky naturally hoped that the cavalry would succeed. Yes, General. The generals of the Russian army also realize the determination of Admiral Letsky. They all hope that the attack tonight will be successful. Of course, there was also a trace of anxiety in their hearts. It is really that the firepower of the German army is too strong, which is about to cast a shadow in their hearts. The soldiers of the first wave of the Russian army who entered the battle had not been completely killed, and the soldiers of the second wave were thrown into the attack. This gave the German army a feeling that the Russian army seemed endless and could not be killed no matter what. Although, in front of the German positions, a thick layer of corpses had already piled up. However, the Russian army still didn't seem to be scared. Damn, aren't those Russians really afraid of death? So many people have died, and they haven't been scared yet. What the hell, we just need to keep firing. No matter how many people they come, kill them all. The soldiers of the German army have long since turned from excitement to numbness. Killing too many people will also make them lose their excitement about it. Everyone is just numbly pulling the trigger and taking the lives of those Russians with bullets. General, the Russians have obviously invested more troops. Can the front line still hold on? If necessary, the 8th Armored Division is ready to fight at any time. Guderian said. Don't worry, Colonel Guderian. The 24th Infantry Division can still hold on. If the Russians keep attacking like this, they won't even try to break through our defense. Major General Besson looked very confident about his troops. Major General Guderian nodded and didn't say much. However, the armored soldiers of the 8th Armored Division are still vigilant. They are all ready to fight and can be thrown into battle at any time. An hour later, the Russian army invested tens of thousands of people one after another, but they were unable to break through the German defense line. Although they caused the German army to consume a lot of ammunition, overall, they still couldn't cause any substantial damage to the German army. Order the cavalry to attack immediately. The Germans are quite tired after fighting for so long. If they seize the opportunity, they should be able to succeed. Admiral Letsky issued an order. More than 10,000 Russian cavalry began to attack. The sound of horseshoes gathered together, as if it was thundering, and even the ground was shaking. The German army on the defense line also discovered this situation and immediately reported it to Major General Besson. Cavalry, the Russians really haven't given up yet, and actually joined the cavalry. Major General Besson's face was gloomy. General, let the 8th Armored Division go to battle. We are experienced in dealing with Russian cavalry. Colonel Guderian asked for a fight. Major General Besson nodded and did not delay any further. He knew that without the assistance of the 8th Armored Division, after a hard battle, the 24th Infantry Division might not be able to withstand the Russian cavalry. Allah, Allah, kill the Germans. Tens of thousands of cavalry, shouting slogans and waving sabers, rushed towards the German position. It's just that, when they were about to rush to the front of the German position, they saw that the front suddenly became transparent. That is, the lights of hundreds of tanks were turned on at this moment. Many Russian cavalry were so shaken that they couldn't even open their eyes. Boom. Boom. Da da da. At this time, the German tanks opened fire. Hundreds of tanks attacked the Russian cavalry with tank guns and machine guns. The dense machine gun bullets caused those cavalrymen who were originally invincible to be swept off their horses one after another. The screams of the cavalry and the roar of the horses were mixed together, making it very noisy. The Russian cavalry suddenly lost their impact in front of the German tanks. Even occasionally, cavalry broke through the dense firepower of German tanks and rushed forward. However, the sabers in their hands did not pose any threat to these armored chariots at all. When the cavalry of the Russian army suffered heavy losses in front of the armored troops of the German army, the generals of the Russian army were completely speechless. They knew that this time it was really over. Chapter 293, Attack on Warsaw. On the night of September 16th, the remnants of the Russian 9th Army were in Pulaski. Not only did they fail to tear through the German defenses, but they also suffered heavy losses. During the night battle, the Russian army lost at least 50,000 people, including several thousand elite cavalry. After losing these troops, the remaining troops of the Russian Ninth Army have less than 100,000 troops. Moreover, they were all terrified and lost their fighting spirit. In the continuous battles, the strength of the German army has made these Russian soldiers feel fear. And this also means that the Russian Ninth Army has no way to retreat south. It can be said that their situation has become very critical now. Just when the Russian army was in a mess and didn't know what to do, the German army had already made a choice for them. At noon on September 17th, the main force of the German 8th Army arrived in the north of Pilori one after another, surrounded the remnants of the Russian 9th Army. Although all the troops of the German 8th Army combined are less than twice that of the remnants of the Russian 9th Army, the encirclement formed is also very weak. However, the Russian army has long seen the strength of the German army, and it is simply not possible to beat it by relying on numbers and strength. Therefore, even if they were given courage, they would not dare to break through rashly. The German army did not leave too much time for the Russian army. In the afternoon, the German 8th Army began to attack the Russian army in the encirclement more brilliant. Under the fierce attack of the German army, the Russian army had no way to stop it, and could only retreat steadily. Their living space has also been continuously compressed. The losses are also increasing. After much difficulty, I persisted until night. The generals of the Russian army didn't want to wait here to die anymore. They all suggested that Admiral Letsky break out of the encirclement. Now, the remnants of the Russian 9th Army, although surrounded, however, it was mainly to the south, east and north, that it was surrounded by German forces. To the west is the Vistula River. The German army did not deploy troops on the west bank of the Vistula River, and this undoubtedly gave them a chance to escape. Of course, it is almost impossible to escape across the river on a large scale. The German army is not a fool, and will never allow such a situation to happen. Admiral Letsky also knows what the generals mean. They wanted to lose their troops and escape by themselves. Rather than staying with the troops and being wiped out by the Germans, it is better to leave the troops and escape by themselves. What's more, these generals didn't care about the lives of ordinary soldiers. Regarding the general's suggestion, Admiral Ritsky accepted it after a little consideration. He is a general of the Russian army, and he managed to get to this level. It would be a pity if he died in battle like this. It is the best thing to be able to save your own life. Even if it will be punished by Tsar Nicholas II for this, it is acceptable. That night, a group of generals of the Russian army, with their confidants, secretly crossed the Vistula River and escaped in the boat they collected. A group of soldiers and middle and low-level officers were left in the encirclement. Early the next morning, the Russian soldiers and middle and low-level officers immediately discovered this problem. After learning that they had been abandoned by those generals, this was a devastating blow to the morale of the Russian soldiers. The Russian soldiers, who didn't have much will to fight, collapsed directly. At this time, the German offensive attacked again. Suddenly, the Russian soldiers who had no fighting spirit surrendered to the German army one after another. Even those generals have already run away, so they naturally don't want to stay to die. A large number of Russian soldiers voluntarily surrendered, which also affected others. In the end, the remnants of the Russian 9th Army, except for a very small number of people who resisted stubbornly, surrendered. This allowed the German 8th Army to easily end the battle on September 18th. This news was immediately reported to the Legion Command. Your Highness, we have achieved a great victory in Pilori. The remnants of the Russian 9th Army have surrendered to us. We once again managed to eat up a Russian army. Admiral Hindenburg and Ludendorff, the major generals, were elated. How could it be so fast? Qin Tian was also a little dazed. Your Highness, the generals of the 9th Army of the Russian army fled last night. Therefore, those soldiers and low-level officers surrendered after losing their command. This is why we can get victory, Major General Ludendorff explained. Qin Tian suddenly realized that the so-called raging soldiers, raging-nests, probably meant this. With all the officials running away, how could the soldiers be expected to continue fighting to the death? That is simply impossible. The Russian generals are running well. It is because they ran that we were able to win so easily, Qin Tian said with a smile. Your Highness, do we need to send people to pursue them? The generals of the Russian army escaped across the Vistula River. If we send a cavalry to pursue them, we may be able to capture them, Admiral Hindenburg asked. Qin Tian shook his head. There is no need for this. The Russian 9th Army has almost been wiped out. Even if those generals flee back, it will be useless. Of course, if they can abandon the troops and escape once, they can escape the second time. The second time. If they still have the opportunity to continue to lead troops, they will probably run away when they meet us next time. This is a good thing for us. Ha ha ha. Admiral Hindenburg and Major General Ludendorff burst into laughter. Indeed, if this is the case, then for them, the advantages will undoubtedly outweigh the disadvantages. Okay, 2. We have eliminated the 2nd Russian Guards Army and the 9th Russian Guards Army. Then, the Russian army in the Kingdom of Poland has almost been wiped out. Let the main force immediately rest and prepare to go to cooperate with the Austro-Hungarian Empire and kill the Russian Southwest Front Army. Transfer the 8th Armored Division and an infantry division to Warsaw. Since the fish has been eaten by us, there is no need to keep the bait. Get off, Qin Tian said. With the 2nd Russian Guards Army and the 9th Russian Guards Army having been wiped out by them, Warsaw will naturally not be left behind. Yes, Your Highness. Major General Ludendorff nodded. The German 8th Armored Division and 24th Infantry Division were ordered to attack Warsaw. Chapter 294. Admiral commits suicide. Warsaw, the headquarters of the Northwest Front of the Russian Army. It's just that there is no difference between the current Russian Northwest Front Army and its existence in name only. First, the Russian Second Army was nearly wiped out, and the First Army surrendered. Now, the Russian Guards Second Army and 9th Army have been wiped out once again. This also made the troops under the Russian Northwest Front Army, except for some remnants of the Second Army, no other troops. Originally, General Ivan Zelensky, the commander of the Russian Northwest Front Army, pinned his hopes on the Russian Army's 2nd Guards Army and 9th Army. Although he knew that these two armies might still not be the opponents of the Germans. But if the 400,000 people of these two armies can reach Warsaw and garrison Warsaw, it will be enough to make Warsaw a strong fortress. No matter how strong the Germans are, it is impossible to capture Warsaw in a very short period of time. In this case, they can at least persist until the Russian army completes its general mobilization. At that time, you can get the support of a steady stream of reinforcement. The Russian army will be able to defeat the German army in the way they are best at. It's just that the reality and his expectations are often the opposite. General Ivan Zelensky ordered the Russian Guards 2nd Front Army and 9th Army to rescue Warsaw, which resulted in the two armies being attacked by the German army. Although, the combat effectiveness of these two armies is not weak. However, under the powerful attack of the German army, the final result is still doomed. When the news that the Russian Guards 2nd Army and 9th Army were successively wiped out by the German 8th Army came to Warsaw, Admiral Ivan Zelensky was completely killed. How is this possible? How could the Germans be so powerful? The 2nd Guards Army is the most powerful army in the Russian army. There is no reason for them to be wiped out so easily by the Germans. Admiral Ivan Zelensky was obviously unwilling to accept such a result. But, facts are facts. Even if Admiral Ivan Zelensky does not accept it, there is no way to change it. The successive destruction of the Russian Guards 2nd Army and 9th Army made the situation in Warsaw even more tense and dangerous. All fools know that after the Germans eat the two armies, they will definitely attack Warsaw. This is beyond doubt. However, with less than 20,000 troops in the city of Warsaw, it is simply a dream to fight against the wolf-like German army. Neither General Ivan Zelensky nor General Samsonov, commander of the Russian Second Army, believed that the Russian army had such combat effectiveness. If the fighting power of the Russian army was really so strong, they would not be defeated by the German army so easily. General, what should we do now? The German offensive will definitely start soon. Admiral Samsonov was as anxious as an ant on a hot pot. What can I do? The Germans, with 1 legion, less than 200,000 troops, successively ate up our 4 group armies, with nearly 900,000 people. What can I do with them with such a powerful fighting force? What about it? Admiral Ivan Zelensky said in frustration. General, why don't we break through the siege? The Germans only deployed a few thousand people outside Warsaw. We still have nearly 20,000 people. If we break through, we will be able to succeed. Admiral Samsonov suggested road breakout. Can it really be successful? The thousands of Germans are enough to stop tens of thousands of us. Besides, even if we successfully break out from Warsaw, where can we go? The entire Kingdom of Poland is the German army. To the west and north is the mainland of Germany, and to the south is the Austro-Hungarian Empire. General Ivan Jilinsky said. Admiral Samsonov immediately fell silent. He also knew that, as Admiral Ivan Jilinsky said, even if they managed to break out of Warsaw, they were still surrounded by the German army. It was impossible for them to escape safely under the siege of the German army. Rather than being chased by the Germans and running around like a dog, it is better to stick to Warsaw. In this case, it may be able to persist for a longer time. General, do we have to stick to Warsaw? Admiral Samsonov seemed a little unwilling. If you stick to Warsaw, you will definitely not end well in the end. He didn't want to die like this. Let's do this for the time being. Let's think about it. Is there any other way? Admiral Ivan Jilinsky sighed. Okay, General. Admiral Samsonov nodded. This time, I guess it's really dead. Admiral Ivan Jilinsky sighed. After Admiral Samsonov left, he thought a lot. He once served as the chief of staff of the Russian army, and undoubtedly still has great prestige among the Russian army. Originally, he thought that he could use this war to gain more military merits and be promoted to marshal in one fell swoop. But he didn't expect that this battle would not be as easy as he expected. The Northwest Front Army had a total of more than 500,000 troops. Under the attack of less than 200,000 German troops, the entire army was almost wiped out. This also cut off his promotion as a marshal. When the 2nd Guards Army and the 9th Army came to support him, he also thought about making a comeback. However, he did not expect that it was precisely because of his command that these two armies were buried, which further increased the losses of the Russian army in this war. General Ivan Jilinsky also knew that under such circumstances, he was probably doomed. Staying in Warsaw, once the city is broken, unless he surrenders to the German army, he will undoubtedly die. Even if there is a chance to escape back to Russia, it is estimated that he will die in the end. For the chief culprit who caused Russia to lose nearly $1 million, Tsar Nicholas II would probably even have the heart to tear him alive. So, no matter how you look at it, Admiral Ivan Jilinsky is dead this time. Oh, I can't surrender to the Germans like that Training camp guy. My family is in Russia. Since I'm always going to die, I'll do it myself. Life. No matter what, I cannot die at the hands of the Germans. Admiral Ivan Jilinsky thought secretly. He has also made up his mind and wants to end his life. General Ivan Jilinsky took out a glass bottle from the drawer of his desk. Inside was a small white pill. With the vodka, Admiral Ivan Jilinsky swallowed the small white pill in one gulp. Soon, severe pain came from the abdomen, and a trace of blood flowed from the corner of Admiral Ivan Jilinsky's mouth. Chapter 295. Return to Berlin. When the body of Admiral Ivan Jilinsky was discovered, it was already that night. The adjutant went to tell Admiral Ivan Jilinsky that dinner was ready. However, it was discovered that the door of the office had been locked. When no one answered the knock on the door, the adjutant found a spare key and opened the door to the office. Only then did he realize that Admiral Ivan Jilinsky was lying on his desk, and the blood that flowed from his mouth had turned black. Admiral Ivan Jilinsky committed suicide, which caused an uproar among the Russian troops in Warsaw. Originally, the successive destruction of the Russian Guards' 2nd Army and 9th Army had already terrified them. Now, even General Ivan Jilinsky, the supreme commander, has committed suicide. This undoubtedly shows that it is impossible to resist the German attack in Warsaw. As a result, the entire city of Warsaw became panic-stricken. Some troops even deserted. What should I do? What should I do now? That guy Jilinsky committed suicide, and now all the pressure is on my head. General Samsonov, anxious like an ant on a hot pot, same. When Admiral Ivan Jilinsky was still there, he was the first in everything. Now that Admiral Ivan Jilinsky is gone, he will naturally have to take over. This is undoubtedly a great pressure for Admiral Samsonov. The Germans are coming soon. It is obviously impossible to fight the Germans. How can we resist the Germans? If we don't fight, what can we do? We can't escape. So Admiral Mazonov turned around in a hurry. How about surrendering to the Germans like that guy leaning camp? If it doesn't work, at least you can save your own life. Admiral Samsonov suddenly had such an idea in his mind. No, I'm a soldier of the Russian Empire and a loyal general of His Majesty the Tsar. How can I join the Germans like that German in leaning camp? Samsonov immediately denied that idea automatically. However, the desire to survive is like a weed, constantly growing in his heart. 2 days later, the 8th Armored Division and the 24th Infantry Division of the German Army arrived in Warsaw and set up a posture to launch an attack on Warsaw. The dark tanks and the cannons all reminded the Russian defenders inside the city that the German troops outside the city were not easy to deal with. If they fail, they will all die here. General Samsonov was also shocked. He knew very well that, if the fight continued, there was really only a dead end. This also made the idea in his heart more firm. So, a funny scene appeared. When the German 8th Armored Division and 24th Infantry Division were preparing to attack Warsaw, General Samsonov, commander of the Russian Second Army, took the initiative to lead the remnants of the Second Army to surrender to the Germans. This left Major General Bezin and Colonel Guderian stunned, but at the same time, very happy. The Russians voluntarily surrendered, so they didn't have to attack. Of course, this also avoided casualties. Although there are not many Russian troops in Warsaw, the equipment is also very simple, and the combat effectiveness is also very bad. But if they concentrate on defense, the German army will inevitably suffer a lot of casualties in urban street fighting. The Russians' voluntary surrender is undoubtedly a great thing. So, after consulting the headquarters, Major General Bezin and Colonel Guderian accepted the surrender of General Samsonov. They assured General Samsonov that the safety of the lives and property of the Russian army would be guaranteed. Of course, this refers primarily to officers. Ordinary soldiers, I'm afraid they don't have this kind of treatment. You know, the German army captured so many prisoners of war. Qin Tian wanted to use them to do coolies. Otherwise, how could it be possible to build a large-scale construction project in the Kingdom of Poland to ensure the effective German occupation of this land? The Russian defenders in Warsaw voluntarily surrendered, bringing the Polish campaign to a successful conclusion. After a big battle, the German 8th Army wiped out the Russian 2nd Guards Army and the 9th Army at a small cost, realizing complete control of the Kingdom of Poland. Next, it is time to implement the third step of the Eastern Front battle plan, that is, to cooperate with the Austro-Hungarian army to defeat the Russian Southwest Front army and defeat the Russian army in one fell swoop. If you can take this opportunity to trigger civil strife in Russia, it would be great. Even if it fails, the Russian army, which has suffered heavy losses, may no longer be able to pose a threat to Germany for a long time to come. The Eastern Front, at least temporarily stable, can buy Germany a lot of time. Especially when the German army failed to win the Battle of the Marne. The stability of the Eastern Front was very important to Germany. Your Highness, after Warsaw is captured, the Legion needs to rest for a period of time. Only then can the third step of the combat plan be implemented, which is to unite with the Austro-Hungarian Empire and fight against the Russian Southwest Front. Major General Ludendorff said. Qin Tian nodded. In the past period of battle, although the casualties of the 8th Army were not large, the loss of weapons and equipment and the consumption of ammunition were quite a lot. In addition, the soldiers are also very tired, and they really need to take a good rest. In addition, the joint Austro-Hungarian army also needs to communicate, which is not taken for granted. If there is no cooperation, it will go wrong. If there is a mistake and they suffer a defeat on the Eastern Front, the consequences will be serious. During this period of time, let's take a rest for the troops. After the rest is over, and the Austro-Hungarian Empire has been in contact with the Austro-Hungarian Empire, we will launch a battle against the Russian Southwest Front Army. Try to defeat the Russian Southwest Front Army before the cold winter. Our absolute advantage on the Eastern Front. Qin Tian said. Yes, Your Highness. Admiral Hindenburg and Major General Ludendorff were full of confidence in this point. I plan to return to Berlin tomorrow. On the one hand, I will dismiss my post to Your Majesty and introduce the situation on the Eastern Front. On the other hand, I will urge the General Staff to fight jointly with the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Qin Tian said. Of course, there was another reason, which he didn't say. However, he believed that Admiral Hindenburg and Major General Ludendorff also knew about it. That is to find a way to pull Zhao Maoki from the position of Chief of Staff. The Battle of the Marne River did not achieve the expected results, which undoubtedly shows that Moltke's modification of the Schlieffen plan was wrong. This, then, is a perfect opportunity to oust him. Now that Zhao Maoki has become Qin Tian's enemy, Qin Tian naturally will not let this opportunity pass by. Chapter 296, The Tsar's Roar. The Russian Guard's 2nd Army and 9th Army were destroyed in the Kingdom of Poland. This was a serious blow to the Russian army and even Russia as a whole. You must know that the total strength of the 4 group armies that were destroyed was more than 900,000, which is already equivalent to 65% of the standing army of the Russian army. Not to mention, there is also the 2nd Guards Army, which is regarded as the elite of the Russian army. If Russia does not have a huge population to support it, losing so many troops will directly make Russia lose in this war. But even so, such a loss was unacceptable to Tsar Nicholas II. No, after learning that the 2nd Guards Army and the 9th Army were destroyed, and the defenders in Warsaw surrendered to the Germans, Nicholas II could no longer hold back his suppressed anger. In the office of the Winter Palace, he roared directly, Why? Why did the army fail again? We have already lost 900,000 people to the Germans' 8th Army. You know, that is just an army with less than 200,000 people. Could it be that the fighting power of the Germans is really so strong that one can outnumber 10? Nicholas II yelled hoarsely with red eyes. A group of senior Russian military and political officials bowed their heads and said nothing. Especially the generals of the army, their faces were flushed. Obviously, they were all ashamed of such a result. Although they are well aware that the combat effectiveness of the Russian army has not been very good. However, with a war like this, they still don't know where to put their old faces. Nicholas II was very angry, and he didn't understand why his army was so bad. Nearly 1 million troops were wiped out within a month. Especially since they were all done by the German 8th Army, which made him feel even more ashamed. If the Russian army has 1 million soldiers, and even the German army of 200,000 can't fight, then how can Russia continue to fight this battle? After a while, Nicholas II finally vented his anger. Everyone, our army has suffered heavy losses on the front line. How should we fight this battle? Nicholas II stared at a group of ministers, his eyes full of unkindness. Your Majesty, I have to admit that we have suffered a disastrous defeat in this war. The fighting power of the Germans has far exceeded our expectations. We originally thought that the Germans would place their main force on the Western Front. It is an opportunity, but I never thought that a German army would be so powerful. Grand Duke Nicholas, the commander-in-chief of the Russian army, looked helpless. As the commander-in-chief of the Russian army, Grand Duke Nicholas undoubtedly has an extremely deep understanding of the combat effectiveness of the Russian army. Although, the combat effectiveness of the Russian army is definitely not in the forefront among the great powers. However, it would be unfair to deny the combat effectiveness of the Russian army in this way. The combat effectiveness of the German army is of course the best in the world. But if it has twice the force advantage, the Russian army can still win. No matter how bad it is, it can be resisted. But this time, the combat effectiveness of the German army was completely extraordinary. Your Majesty, the German 8th Army we are facing should be the most powerful army in the German army. The commander of this army is the Crown Prince of Germany. According to the information we have obtained before, and the information collected on the battlefield, the equipment of this regiment is very sophisticated, and its firepower is very strong. An infantry division has more artillery and machine guns than our army. It is conceivable that with such powerful firepower, their combat effectiveness will soar level, said Russian Army Minister Sukhomlinov. It is no secret that the German army has advanced equipment. In particular, the 8th Army was built by Qin Tian into a force with the best firepower in the world, and Nicholas II also knew about it. At first, he thought it was because the German crown prince had too much money and had no place to spend it, so he used so much money to build a luxurious army. If this money is used in Russia, they can arm at least 4 armies groups. Nicholas II confidently believed that the 4 Russian armies could definitely defeat the German 8th Army. But now, reality slapped him hard. The 4 Russian armies, including an elite army, were all eaten up by the German 8th Army. I brought you here not to hear how powerful the Germans are. After we lost 4 armies, the front line is very empty. Now, what should we do? If the Germans launch an attack, if not, we will have no way to stop their attack. Nicholas II said with a serious face. Before the mobilization has not been completed, and the standing army has suffered heavy losses, the vast territory in western Russia is almost undefended. Once the German army launches an offensive, it will surely be able to break through, and let Russia fall into a large area of territory. Russian Tsars each had an obsession with land that others could not understand. So did Tsar Nicholas II. He absolutely cannot allow the territory of Russia to fall. Your Majesty, most of our mobilization has been completed. Soon, we will have enough troops to send to the battlefield. Therefore, there is no need to worry about insufficient troops. Of course, the combat effectiveness of the newly formed troops is bound to be inferior to that of the standing army. Yes. Therefore, we must have a sufficient force advantage to be able to confront the Germans. Therefore, I suggest that we start the second phase of mobilization immediately and increase the total strength of our army to more than 5 million. Nicholas II said with a serious face. Nicholas II frowned. If so many troops were to be mobilized, it would definitely cost a lot of money. However, when you think of how powerful the German army is, if you don't mobilize a large number of troops, you will not be an opponent of the German army at all. Therefore, Nicholas II did not object to the second stage of mobilization. If the Germans attack us, how should we hold them off? Nicholas II asked. Your Majesty, the Germans should not launch an attack on us in a short time. Their strength is too small, only 1 legion. The successive wars must have caused them a lot of losses. Even if the losses are not large, but weapons and ammunition also need to be replenished. Tired soldiers also need time to rest. Therefore, we still have enough time. Grand Duke Nicholas said. Tsar Nicholas II was relieved after hearing this. Chapter 297, Qin Tian's Guarantee. On September 21st, Qin Tian's special train arrived in Berlin. The Minister of War of the Empire, von Falkenhayn, personally went to the train station to meet Qin Tian. Your Highness, welcome back to Berlin. Your Highness commanded the 8th Army and achieved great victories on the Eastern Front. Your Majesty is very happy. The entire German Empire is cheering for Your Highness's victory. Von Falkenhayn said with an old face. The smile is like a chrysanthemum. Of course, the current von Falkenhayn has enough reasons to be happy. First of all, Qin Tian's 8th Army won the victory on the Eastern Front and wiped out more than 900,000 enemies. This is undoubtedly a huge victory for Germany. As a member of Qin Tian's family, von Falkenhayn was naturally happy about this. Second, the Battle of the Marne was over. The German army lost 220,000 people, but they were still unable to push the front line to the city of Paris. On the contrary, the British and French allied forces persisted under the fierce German attack, which made the British and French allied forces more determined to resist Germany. It can be said that the plan to end the war quickly has gone bankrupt. This is undoubtedly very bad news for Germany, but for von Falkenhayn, it is different. This means that his old opponent, Little Maoki, is in big trouble right now. Von Falkenhayn has always wanted to replace Maoki as the chief of the general staff and become the #1 person in the military. However, he was always suppressed by Zhao Maoki. Now, Little Maoki made a big mistake himself, which gave him a chance. What's more, with Qin Tian's victory on the Eastern Front, Qin Tian's prestige in the country has once again risen to a high level. Even William II had to pay attention to Qin Tian's opinion and attitude. If Qin Tian fulfills his promise and supports him, von Falkenhayn believes that the possibility of him successfully squeezing out Maoki and becoming the chief of the general staff is undoubtedly very high. It can be said that he has seen the post of chief of staff beckoning to him. Minister of the Army, you are too polite. How can I bother you to come and greet me in person? Qin Tian also had a smile on his face. He knew exactly what von Falkenhayn was thinking. However, he is also happy to help von Falkenhayn achieve his wish. After all, von Falkenhayn took the initiative to join him. In terms of emotion and reason, he should let von Falkenhayn take another step. Your Highness, let's go to the palace. Your Majesty is waiting for you. Von Falkenhayn said. Qin Tian nodded. Qin Tian and von Falkenhayn took a car together and went to the palace. The Great War has broken out for more than a month, and it has also had some impact on Germany. Even as the capital of the empire, Berlin is somewhat depressed. At least, there are not so many people on the street. From what Qin Tian learned, there was no material shortage in Germany because of the sufficient reserves before the war. However, if the war continues, this phenomenon will inevitably occur, and it will become more and more serious. It's just that there is no way to do it, and this is one of the effects of war. The only thing Qin Tian can do is try his best to find a way to end the war as soon as possible. Other than that, he had no other choice. Your Highness, the Battle of the Marne is over, and we lost 250,000 people. Although the losses of the British and French forces were a little more than ours. However, our strategic goal has not been achieved. Paris is still tens of kilometers away from our front. Besides, for us, Paris is so easy to get. However, we have lost the opportunity to capture Paris. Von Falkenhayn sighed. Well, no one thought that the situation on the Western Front would become so bad. Qin Tian said. Although, he already knew that in another time and space, the German army ended in failure in the Battle of the Marne. In the next 2 years, no matter how hard we try, we will not be able to make a breakthrough. But in this time and space, at least because of him, the strength of the German army has been strengthened. Originally, he thought that it might bring about some changes. But I didn't expect that the inertia of history would be so strong, and the German army was still on the verge of failure. Von Falkenhayn nodded. During this battle, we not only lost a large number of troops, but also consumed a large amount of combat supplies. The soldiers are also very tired after continuous fighting. Therefore, in a short time, we may not be able to launch another offensive. This war will inevitably fall into a protracted war. Your Excellency, don't be so pessimistic. Even this time, we have no chance to capture Paris. However, this does not mean that we will never have a chance. The 8th Army will continue to attack Russia. If we can make the situation on the Eastern Front, if there is a fundamental change, we can end the state of fighting on 2 fronts and concentrate our main force to deal with the British and French allied forces. Qin Tian said. Your Highness, do you want to defeat the Russians with the 8th Army alone? I'm afraid it will be very difficult. Von Falkenhayn frowned. Your Excellency, I will not say what we will do specifically for the time being. It needs to be kept secret. However, the 8th Army hopes to cooperate with the Austro-Hungarian Empire in the future to attack the Russian Southwest Front Army. The matter of joining forces with the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and have they discussed it? Qin Tian asked. This matter, the General Staff is advancing. However, because someone has been out of state recently, there has been little progress. However, I don't think there should be a big problem. The subordinates have suffered a lot of defeats. If they can join forces with us to eliminate the Russian Southwest Front Army, this will undoubtedly be a great thing for them. As long as the heads of those guys in the Austro-Hungarian Empire are not caught by the door, they won't object, said von Falkenhayn. Has the father's attitude towards Xiaomaoki changed? Qin Tian asked. Because of the defeat in the Battle of the Marne, Your Majesty's attitude towards Little Moltke has changed a lot. Speaking of this, a smile appeared on von Falkenhayn's face. Seeing Xiaomaoki lose power, he was undoubtedly very happy in his heart. That's good. Xiaomaoki has great talent and lack of talent, and he modified the Schlieffen plan indiscriminately, so that the Imperial Army was in a disadvantageous situation in this war. He should be responsible for it. At that time, I will recommend it to the Emperor, and Your Excellency will take over as the position of Chief of Staff. Qin Tian said. Thank you, Your Highness. I promise, I will follow His Highness's lead in the future. Von Falkenhayn was even more excited after receiving Qin Tian's guarantee. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 298, Talking on the East Front. Father, I'm back. After Qin Tian and von Falkenhayn arrived at the palace, they went directly to William II's office. "Well, Oscar, you're on the Eastern Front, and you've done a great job." William II applauded. The performance of Qin Tian and the 8th Army on the Eastern Front indeed exceeded William II's expectations. Although, before the outbreak of the war, Qin Tian invested a huge amount of money in purchasing various equipment for the 8th Army, which greatly improved the combat effectiveness of the 8th Army. However, William II did not think that the 8th Army alone could withstand the Russian attack. In William II's view, although the Russian army's combat effectiveness is not strong, its terrifying military superiority is still unmatched by other countries. The 8th Army has less than 200,000 people, and it may be able to repel 1 or 2 attacks by the Russian army, but it is almost impossible to completely defend the Eastern Front. Originally, William II still thought about waiting for the victory on the Western Front, and then quickly dispatched troops to the Eastern Front to reinforce the 8th Army. But what William II did not expect was that the Western Front did not achieve a decisive victory as he expected. Although the German army has invaded northern France, it is only a few tens of kilometers away from Paris. But the last few tens of kilometers made it impossible for them to break through. Although the German army still has an advantage on the Western Front, its losses are also heavy. Moreover, it is undoubtedly very difficult to launch a further attack. Just when William II was disappointed with the Western Front, the Eastern Front gave him an unexpected surprise. Qin Tian and the 8th Army, relying on less than 200,000 troops, defeated the attacks of the 4 Russian armies successively and wiped out all 4 of them, eliminating nearly 900,000 troops. Russian army. Such victories seem to be more brilliant than those on the Western Front. You know, the German army invested 7 times more troops on the Western Front than on the Eastern Front. The Russian army, which has lost so many elite troops, is already seriously injured. Although Russia is still mobilizing, their terrifying soldiers will still pose a huge threat to Germany. But Wilhelm II was no longer so worried. Even if the Russians will launch an offensive again, it will not be possible in a short time, which will give Germany more breathing time. How the situation will develop by then is hard to say. Father, the reason why the 8th Legion can achieve today's achievements is entirely under your wise leadership and support. Qin Tian dare not take credit for himself, especially in front of such a stubborn and conceited person like William II. King William II nodded in satisfaction. He was very satisfied with Qin Tian's performance. Oscar, you fought well on the Eastern Front. Next, what do you think of the Eastern Front? William II asked. Father, although the Russian army has been severely damaged by us, however, their strength is still not to be underestimated. Especially now that the Russians are still mobilizing. Once they complete the mobilization, they can dispatch millions of troops to continue attack us. Qin Tian said with a serious face. The terrifying number of troops in the Russian army has always been a headache for European countries. Oscar, I'm very happy that you can keep a clear head. The Russians are indeed not that easy to deal with. William II said. Yes, father. In view of the current overall battle situation, I think we need to further weaken the Russians on the Eastern Front. In the next step, the 8th Army hopes to cooperate with the Austro-Hungarian Empire to eliminate the Russians. The Southwest Front Army. Our allies fought very badly against the Russians. If we don't help them, it may be difficult for them to win. This is very unfavorable for the Eastern Front. Qin Tian said. If the Austro-Hungarian Empire is repeatedly defeated, the loss is the strength of the Allies. At that time, Germany will even have to invest more power on the Eastern Front to ensure the suppression of Russia. In this case, it is bound to affect Germany's investment on other fronts. The Austro-Hungarian Empire did very poorly in this war. They had much more sophisticated weapons and equipment than the Russians, and their troops were no less than the Russians. But they were still defeated by the Russians. William II one face of sarcasm. However, the Austro-Hungarian Empire is our ally after all. Helping them stabilize the situation on the Eastern Front is also good for us. I personally support the 8th Army's alliance with the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Falkenhayn, you are responsible for communicating with the Austro-Hungarian Empire about the joint war. William II continued. Yes, Your Majesty. Von Falkenhayn said happily. According to the usual practice, little Malky is often responsible for such matters. But now, William II has given him the responsibility. Isn't it obvious that he no longer trusts little Malky? This also made von Falkenhayn more confident about replacing Malky and taking over the position of Chief of Staff. Qin Tian also realized this and felt a little more happy in his heart. If Xiao Moqi can be squeezed out of active duty, it will be of great help to him to further increase his influence in the army. Xiao Moqi seemed to have become the key figure preventing Qin Tian from expanding his strength in the army. Oscar, the Austro-Hungarian Empire will definitely not refuse our help. However, how confident is the 8th Army in cooperating with the Austro-Hungarian Empire to defeat the Russian Southwest Front Army? William II asked. William II did not hope that not only did he fail to win, but also suffered heavy losses. The German army's advantage on the Eastern Front would be wiped out. This will also be very unfavorable for Germany, father. Judging from the experience of the 8th Army fighting against Russia before, the Russians have nothing to do with the powerful firepower of the 8th Army. They have organized many attacks on the 8th Army's defense line. Even the Cossack cavalry was also dispatched. But in the end, all of them hit our defense line with bloodshed, heavy losses, and rivers of blood. And the powerful assault capabilities of our armored forces also made it impossible for the Russians to resist. Can't stop. The powerful firepower, coupled with the assault capability of the armored force, is undoubtedly the main reason why the 8th Army was able to win more with less on the Eastern Front, Qin Tian said. King William II nodded, but at the same time, he also had another thought in his mind. Can the powerful firepower and armored forces improve the combat effectiveness of the troops so much? I wonder if it will be useful on the Western Front. Chapter 299, Replacing Little Maoki. Early before the war broke out, when Qin Tian's German Arms Company produced a series of advanced weapons, it specifically suggested that the German army purchase those weapons and equipment to enhance the firepower of the troops. Unfortunately, at that time, Xiao Moqi blocked this procurement plan due to personal reasons. Although, under pressure, some were purchased, but only a small part. These weapons and equipment were evenly distributed to the troops on the Western Front. Although, it played a certain role in enhancing the firepower of the troops. However, due to the small amount, it did not have a significant effect. If the Western Front troops were also armed according to the 8th Army, maybe we had defeated the British and French allied forces. William II was very angry. His trust in little Maoki also completely disappeared. In his opinion, if it wasn't for little Maoki, maybe the German army had already won the victory on the Western Front, and they would not be in an increasingly unfavorable situation, like they are now. Perhaps, it's time to replace Moltke. His existence will not help the German Empire win future wars. William II thought secretly, although little Maoki was his good friend. However, in the face of the great cause of empire, friendship can definitely be abandoned. Father, if we can cooperate with the Austro-Hungarian Empire and eliminate the Russian Southwest Front Army on the Eastern Front, this will cause the Russian army to suffer unprecedented heavy losses. Especially their elite standing army is almost lost. Even if they mobilize and arm more troops, they are all troops with weak combat effectiveness. It is undoubtedly very difficult to pose a threat to the empire. A large number of troops in the Austro-Hungarian Empire can also be liberated. Regardless of it is very beneficial to go to the Southern Front or stay on the Eastern Front to guard against the Germans. Qin Tian continued. Austro-Hungary did perform very badly in this war. Not only was it defeated by the Russians on the Eastern Front, but it still failed to win the war against Serbia on the Southern Front. Although, the army they dispatched was 2 or 3 times that of Serbia, and their weapons and equipment were far more advanced than the Serbian army. However, it still looks like this. This made Qin Tian have to admit that among Germany's allies, none of them knew how to fight, and almost all of them were pig teammates. This also makes Germany simply cannot count on these allies to provide them with much help. If you don't delay, that is God's blessing. And Germany, like a lone hero, had to use the power of one country to fight against the whole world. Under such circumstances, if Germany can win, then it is really a ghost. King William II nodded, expressing his support for Qin Tian's Eastern Front strategy. Father, in addition, we are still on the Eastern Front, and have prepared some secret means. You know, I have been secretly supporting the Russian Cloth Party for these years. The situation in Russia is very bad. The brutal rule of the Tsarist government has already made many Russians dissatisfied. Now, on the battlefield, the Russian army has been defeated one after another and suffered heavy losses. This has also made the contradictions in Russia more acute. Perhaps, only one opportunity is needed, and there will be civil strife. This will be of great benefit to the German Empire. Qin Tian continued. King William II was taken aback for a moment, but then his face was filled with ecstasy. Qin Tian is supporting the Russian Cloth Party, which he knows. Although, he didn't have a good opinion of the Russian Cloth Party, and even warned Qin Tian not to let the Russian Cloth Party develop into Germany. However, if the Russian Cloth Party can really mess up Russia, this is undoubtedly great news for the German Empire as civil strife in Russia, no matter what, the war may not be able to continue. In this case, the crisis on the German Eastern Front can be completely resolved. They no longer have to worry about fighting on two fronts. We can devote more power to the Western Front and strive for victory on the Western Front. Very good, very good. Oscar, the support for the Russian Bundesliga will continue to be strengthened. The most likely possibility is to help them launch an uprising in Russia. This will be crucial to the German Empire. Wilhelm II, she said. Yes, father. Qin Tian nodded. Your Majesty, once civil strife breaks out in Russia, we will be able to completely resolve the Eastern Front. At that time, if we attack the Western Front with all our strength, we may not be able to completely defeat the British and French allied forces and win the war. Von Falkenhayn also said. William II nodded. He thought so too. Father, if we can unite with the Austro-Hungarian Empire and eliminate the Russian Southwest Front Army, then, in order to stabilize the situation on the front line, Tsar Nicholas II is very likely to transfer the 1st Guards Army from St. Petersburg. Without the threat of the 1st Guards Army, the possibility of the Russian Cloth Party and other political forces in Russia launching an uprising will be very high. Qin Tian continued. Both Wilhelm II and von Falkenhayn became excited. For them, this is undoubtedly excellent news. Once successful, it is very possible that Germany will gain further advantages on the battlefield. Oscar, what do you think of the situation on the Western Front? William II asked. Father, I have to say that the battle on the Western Front was very bad. When the war broke out, we had such a big advantage, but in the end we were not able to defeat France quickly. This is definitely a fatal mistake. Although, now we still have an advantage. However, this advantage is rapidly disappearing. Even if we try our best to defeat the British and French allied forces, it will definitely be a tragic victory. The price we pay will not be so small. Qin Tian said. Oh. William II sighed heavily. He obviously did not expect that the battlefield on the Western Front would evolve into what it is now. Before the war broke out, he was full of confidence in the battle situation. Father, the reason why the battlefield on the Western Front became like this, as the Chief of the General Staff, Zhao Maoki, has an inescapable responsibility for this. I propose to remove Zhao Maoki as the Chief of the General Staff. Qin Tian said suddenly. William II's face became serious. He was also very dissatisfied with little Maoki. However, he still hesitated to make him make an immediate decision to replace little Maoki. Oscar, I understand your attitude. I will think about it carefully. Chapter 300, Last Effort. The German General Staff. Zhao Maoki is still the Chief of the German General Staff, so he still stays here to work. However, because the Battle of the Marne failed to achieve the expected results, Germany became more and more dissatisfied with Moltke, and even William II's attitude towards Moltke had undergone a fundamental change. This made many people feel that Zhao Maoki's chief of staff might not last long. Even Zhao Maoki himself has no confidence in the future. Before launching the Battle of the Marne, he undoubtedly had great confidence in this battle, thinking that he would definitely be able to take this opportunity to defeat the British and French allied forces and achieve a major breakthrough on the Western Front. But I didn't expect that it would end up like this. However, Little Moltke did not submit his resignation to William II after the Battle of the Marne like in another time and space. Because, in another time and space, the heir to the empire is still Crown Prince William. The relationship between Little Maoki and Crown Prince William is very close, which makes Little Maoki not worried about how much impact he will be affected after resigning. However, this space-time is completely different. In this time and space, Qin Tian, the fake Prince Oscar, became the Crown Prince of the Empire. And the relationship between Zhao Maoki and Qin Tian is like fire and water. Zhao Maoki has no doubts at all. Once he loses the power in his hands, Qin Tian will definitely not let him go. Therefore, the current Little Maoki doesn't want to lose the power in his hands. Besides, he was originally a person who missed power very much. Your Excellency, General Protwitz is here. The secretary reported to Little Moltke. Well, let him come in. Little Maoki nodded. Although Plotwitz's ability and character made Little Moltke very despised, but also as the favorite of William II, the relationship between Little Moltke and Plotwitz is still very good. What's more, they all have a common enemy, that is Qin Tian. The so-called enemy of an enemy is a friend, which makes the relationship between Little Maoki and Plotwitz very close. Your Excellency, Chief of Staff. After Plotwitz entered the office, he saluted Little Maoki. Sit down, General Protwitz. Little Moltke said. The two exchanged a few pleasantries, and after Little Maoki's secretary left, Protwitz immediately stopped the topic just now. Your Excellency Chief of Staff, Oscar is back, Plotwitz said. Little Maoki nodded. He knew the news. The 8th Army won a brilliant victory on the Eastern Front. Kaiser Wilhelm II summoned Qin Tian to report to Berlin. However, this is not good news for him. The better Qin Tian and the 8th Army performed on the Eastern Front, the more he consigned his incompetence. This also made his situation even more precarious. Of course, Qin Tian and the 8th Army's achievements on the Eastern Front, even Zhao Maoki, Qin Tian's enemy, had to admire them. Originally, because of the defeat on the Western Front, Germany's situation became very critical. Even Zhao Maoki asserted that Germany might have lost the war. However, the dazzling performance on the Eastern Front enabled Germany to once again gain the upper hand. Even, there may not be no chance of turning defeat into victory. Your Excellency, Chief of Staff, why are you not in a hurry at all? That guy Oscar is in the same situation as you. When he returns to Berlin this time, he will definitely take the opportunity to speak ill of you in front of His Majesty. At that time, how can you be the Chief of the General Staff? If you are replaced by His Majesty, the consequences will be unimaginable. Protwitz was a little out of breath. Plotwitz knew that there was no room for maneuver in his relationship with Qin Tian. Therefore, he has always looked down upon Qin Tian Heyo. Now, Qin Tian's performance is already too dazzling. If Zhao Maoki loses power again, no one will be able to check and balance Qin Tian. At that time, it would be easier for Qin Tian to deal with him than to crush an ant to death. And this is not what Protwitz wants to happen. He still wants to continue to enjoy the glory and wealth, and even climb to a higher position. Whether I will continue to serve as the Chief of Staff is not decided by Oscar, but by His Majesty. His Majesty's attitude cannot be influenced by anyone, Zhao Maoki said. However, Your Excellency the Chief of Staff, today's Oscar is different from the past. His words carry a lot more weight. If he doesn't think about it, His Majesty may really be deceived by him. Prithvisi tried hard to persuade. After listening to Protwitz's words, Little Moltke hesitated for a while, and finally nodded. Okay, I'll go to see His Majesty right away. Make another effort. If Your Majesty has already made the final decision, then there is no other way. Little Maoki said. Your Excellency, Chief of Staff, His Majesty will forgive you for the sake of past friendship. Protwitz beamed with joy. When Little Maoki arrived at the palace, William II had just finished his official duties and was resting. When the waiter told him that Little Maoki asked to see him, William II hesitated. In fact, he had already made a decision to replace Little Maoki. However, when he thought of the friendship between him and Little Maoki, he still felt a little guilty. When he was young, he had a very good relationship with Little Maoki. The two even supported each other. Now, this friendship is finally coming to an end. Let him in, said William II. Yes, Your Majesty. Soon, little Moltke walked into William II's office. "Your Majesty." Little Maoki saluted King William II respectfully. "Sit down. Your Majesty, I heard that His Highness the Crown Prince is back. The performance of His Highness the Crown Prince and the 8th Army on the Eastern Front is really amazing and unbelievable. The 8th Army alone has less than 200,000 troops, can wipe out the 4 armies of the Russian army, nearly 900,000 people, and the crisis on the Eastern Front of the Empire has been resolved for the most part. It also makes the unfavorable situation that the Empire is now facing a fundamental turning point." Little Maoki he spoke highly of the performance of Qin Tian and the 8th Army. King William II shook his head involuntarily. He was very clear about the relationship between Maoki and Qin Tian, and the relationship between the two was almost on fire. Now, little Maoki was able to say such a thing. What his purpose was, William II also knew clearly. However, even if little Maoki had such a change, he would not change his decision. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.